All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of The Heartbeat. Tonight I'm your fill in host, Sean Showtime Bryant. That's me. And tonight we're going to have a wonderful show. It's a tribute to a legend, a man that wrestled all over the world, many places, Killer Tim Brooks. Tonight we have some of his associates, co workers, partners, and all kinds of legends. Dr. Mike Lano, historian, is going to he's going to basically run the show after we get everything kicked off here. But for starters, we're going to bring on the host with the most, the guy whose show this is really all about, Mr. Bruce Hart and producer Bob Johnson. How you doing, guys? You're on, Bob.
Hey guys, thanks, Sean, for doing this for us this evening. This will be a great tribute to. Yeah, way too much. I'm going to bring the host with the most, Dr. Mike Lano, and joining us is Nick Curry and his dad Fred, and of course Sean and Mickey Doyle. And we expect some other people to be calling in. And I've got a lot of Facebook messages already. Some from many people want to. Tributes. I'll read them out throughout the show. So, Bruce, all yours, my man.
Well, thanks. I'd like to thank all of you guys for coming on. I had the pleasure of knowing the great Tim Brooks. He worked. Calgary was one of my dad's top heels for about nearly 2 years in the late 70s. So I was a longtime fan of Tim's, and I've hooked up with him over the years a few times, and sort of an old school heel, and had a great pedigree. And I've never heard anything bad said about Tim. So many people I spoke to that know Tim always speak very highly of him, and great guy in the dressing room, great guy on the road, great guy in the ring. And like all of you guys, I was sad to hear of his passing, but we're here to celebrate his life and reflect on some of the many great matches and things that he did for our business. So I'd just like to thank everybody for coming in, and to the listeners for seeing fit to join us. And it should be a great show.
All right, then, without further ado, let's turn it over to Dr. Mike Lano.
Hey, everybody. I hope we'll wait till my lousy image. No one wants to look at me, but we'll wait till my image comes aboard here. And while we're waiting on that, I want to. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to first pay tribute, as I've done on a number of shows, to Hana Kimura. We lost that great stardom young lady wrestler over social media. So please be kind on social media. This person was trashed, a wrestler, for doing a reality show, and took her own life at age 23. We also lost, maybe we can get into it a little bit later, a total legend. I wrote about him on the Cauliflower Alley site, as I did the minute I heard about our Tim Brooks. Johnny Rubberman Walker, who most would know as Mr. Wrestling 2 all throughout the South, total legend down there, is one of our legends that we have here. I immediately, when I wanted to do this, and I knew I was already going to Brother Bruce Johnson, I wanted to bring up Fred Curry, who was a total legend. Total. I mean, doesn't get bigger than that in the Midwest. He was part of the Sheik's territory, obviously in Ohio with Pedro Martinez, Buffalo, Ohio. Joined those two, Pedro Martinez and Johnny Powers, and then, of course, Toronto, big. But he wrestled all over the world, Japan tours, Australia tours. He reminded me, I'd forgotten the old tag step with the incredible NWA World Champion Jack Briscoe. This is our Flying Fred Curry, and he has a fantastic wrestler son. I had met his other wrestling stud, Fred Jr., at a Cauliflower Alley in the year 2000 in Vegas. And but now we have Nick Curry over there on the right, who I hear is a tremendous heel, but he can go baby. He can mat and chain because he's been trained by his great dad. And Tim Brooks, just very briefly, well, Fred, you heard, and I'm not sure, but the word we all got that he was broken in by his legit nephew, Dick Murdoch. Was that kind of what you heard? What do you remember when you first met Tim Brooks?
That is correct. He was broken in by them, and he worked with Dusty and Murdoch all over. But one thing about Tim Brooks, he was a natural. He could talk on that TV. He had that gruff voice like a Tony Bourne. He had a lot of action. He was always there and everything like that. Every match I had was stole the show with. Tim Brooks was one hell of a worker. I couldn't believe it. In fact, it showed because a lot of territories around the country wanted him, and I couldn't wait to work with him. He was unbelievable, and I guess Murdoch, he taught him real good because Tim is a funny guy too.
Not a bad teacher. It's great when family members, as your sons, or the whole Hart family trains each other, trains other family members, etc. Because really, in the 60s and 70s, maybe 50s, there really weren't these wrestling schools. I think the very first one would have been Gagne in like 73 when Gagne and Billy Robinson in Minnesota started training guys. And then really Giant Baba, Shohei Baba, would send guys to Amarillo to the Funks to finesse, to come back and be bigger because they would bill them as having conquered America. But there really weren't all of these schools that we see now. So that's why you want to seek somebody with credibility, whether it's a Terry Funk, a Fred Curry. We had Killer Kowalski for many, many years in the Boston area too, total legend. But when Tim Brooks first came, or when he started, he went through a couple of, he had to find himself. He had short hair at the beginning. He worked with a hood on for a while. And then once they put him, and the whole gimmick got finessed, I don't know who takes credit for that, but when the gimmick got finessed and they put him with Eddie Creechman as his manager, our Dave Brzezinski, who I really want to thank, he did a video. I hope we can show at some point, but with all of his great photos, because he worked in the office. I only came in and shot a couple of things here and there when Bruiser and Sheik were having the territory war in Detroit. As Fred will remember, maybe we can ask Fred about that. But once he got linked up with Creechman, which was neat because in Montreal years later, both Eddie and Floyd Creechman, his son, would manage him up there. But the gimmick he used was as a kayfabe brother or relative to Bruiser Brody, and he was known as Buster Brody. So he went up there. So, like in 71, he's managed by Eddie Creechman in the great Detroit territory. But a couple of years later, and the trajectory was once he left Detroit, and I know a bunch of guys left, like the great Tony Marino and others that were Fred's peers, they formed a rival promotion there. It wasn't the Bruiser's WWA promotion. It was in direct competition to Sheik. But from there, he actually came in. Sheik brought a bunch of his guys in to help save us in LA in 74. Tim Brooks was one of them. He then went up to Calgary, and then, of course, had the history in Atlanta, selling the belt way before Vince stole that angle. He sold the belt to Kevin Sullivan there before they did the thing with DiBiase and Andre for WWF. And, of course, he had Great Portland. We had some Japan tours. Before I forget, and then I'm going to shut up and go right to Mickey Doyle, of course, another legend of Detroit, and Fred Curry, ultimate legend. When he came into LA in 74, when I was with him in Japan for Kenner's promotion, Tim was paired up with Bob Orton Jr., and these guys, could pull some ribs. Maybe Fred can remember some ribs that Tim might have pulled. Maybe he was, younger than the other guys, so he didn't pull ribs. But there, in January 4th of 1991 at a show in Osaka, we're with him in the back in the locker room, and before the first starts, they're just taking their food from their bento box. They just start having this massive food fight. And Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty are looking at it, and they tell me, well, those guys don't work for Vince, and we need to keep on our best behavior because we just got, another firing from Vince. So we're not going to do anything wrong in front of Blackjack Lanza. So we're just kicking back and enjoying the food fight that Bob Orton Jr. and Killer Tim Brooks are putting on. So with that, let's get back to Fred Curry and Mickey. Fred, do you have any road or rib stories or anything out of the ordinary that you can remember Tim involved with? Or you weren't a rib puller.
Yeah.
I thought you were pretty strictly
How long do we have?
as long as
I could talk to you about 2 hours with that guy. I got to tell you one story. We were coming back from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Tim Brooks and I and Tokyo Tom, Ray Urbano was in the back, and we were using his car, and we're driving. And anyway, we had to stop for one of those on the side rest stops, and we all go on and everything like that. We all go back in the car, and we take off about 40 miles down the road. We're talking. Tim Brooks looks to me. He says, by the way, Ray, how do you like what we did? We turn around. Ray Urbano is not there. He was left on the side of the road. We had to double back all the way back, and there we found Ray Urbano, Tokyo Tom, under a pile of hay. What the hell happened here? I mean, it was an unbelievable. And Tim Brooks, you know, he was always there. And one thing I want to go real quick on is that you said there was no wrestling schools. One that Mickey Doyle wrestling, Luke Klein.
Luke Klein, I forgot about that. Luke Klein.
And but I mean, it was always a lot of action working with, you know, with the man there. And you know, he was like a little bit of the Bull Curry, a little bit of the Cheek, and he was a bruising, unbelievable worker. Tim Brooks, I'm telling you, and you know, the sad part of it, he was too darn young to pass away. But I talked to him on the phone before, you know, when he was getting sick. He says, "Gee, Fred, man," he said, "I'm losing 10 pounds a week." Then I mentioned a couple other things like that, and he said, "By the way, can you get a hold of Tony Marino for me?" I said, "Hey, Tim, I don't know where the hell he is. I think he's in Florida." Anyway, he was always upbeat. In fact, Nick told me, he said, "You know, I got a lot of respect for the guy because he was really down and he was laying on the bed and he put a thumbs up. You know, he just faced what he had to face." But Tim Brooks, he had it all together because at that time when I was there, when I was I had every guy I worked with was a legend, from the Cheek to Kurt Von Hess to you know, every guy was top.
I was we were trying to bring aboard, but he lives down in South America somewhere, as Mickey knows, and Dave Brzezinski. We're all trying to get him on Facebook.
Who's that? Who lives?
John Anson, Kurt Von Hess. We were trying to get him on this show. Tony Marino's not well.
Von Schatz.
Yeah, Von Schott, because I think Von Hess is no longer around.
Okay, yeah, Von Schatz. But well, you're talking about legends. I mean, everybody came in through there. Ernie Ladd, who was all-time great in that area and pretty much everywhere he went, one of the best.
Well, that was a hell of a worker there. He could talk to.
Yeah.
And a hell of a football player.
But let's talk about legends. There's been like urban myths. A lot of us have been searching for the Holy Grail. And that, Fred, that's your footage of your father, the great Bull Curry, who we talk about legends, but this guy was on an upper tier with the Fezes and the Ganyas and the Killer Kowalskis and folks of that nature, because everywhere he went, he was main event. He was like a godfather of hardcore.
Well, I'm going to give you a legend that Brooks worked with, and you haven't mentioned, Bobo Brazil.
Oh, of course.
Bobo Brazil was one hell of a worker, and he was all over the world. He was on top. And he told me, that kid, man, Brad, he's okay. You know, he creates a lot of disturbance in the ring. I love working with him. He said, I said, well, that makes two of us. Oh, Tim Brooks, boy, I tell you, he had it. And he told me Eddie Priestman was his manager. That's right. You couldn't get a better manager. Maybe outside of Farouk.
Yeah, Ernie Roth, it was tough to beat because Ernie Roth, whether he was Mr. Clean, the Grand Wizard for Vince Sr., or of course Abdullah Farouk and I think the only place he did that besides combine, let's say, Michigan, Ohio, Buffalo, Toronto, was in Los Angeles, where Ernie did a lot of mixed matches, which was always fun and unique. I think Dave Brzezinski said he only did it once with the Sheik. This was Abdullah Farouk and Sheik as a tag team. But in
I
LA,
got to tell you one real quick thing. Ernie Ross and the Sheik, they wrestled against Wild Bull Curry and Flying Fred in Honolulu, Hawaii.
oh wow.
HIC building. We packed the place. I mean, it was a pleasure working against that cat.
Fred, let me ask you, and then I want to bring up Mickey because we've been neglecting Mickey. We're still waiting for Pampero Firpo's daughter, Mary Catchmanian Freeze, who's going to be co-hosting this thing with me, but she might be on the airplane with Abby right now. She's listening, and she knows what I mean because we were supposed to have Abdullah the Butcher with us on too, who's booking. But the HIC arena was amazing because Fred, as you remember, both the faces and heels would come down the aisle with those incredible colorful lays. It was the only place, it was just eye-popping with color. Everybody walking down the aisle at what's known as Blaisdell now, but back then it was the HIC, the Honolulu International Center, packed with guys like you going back and forth to Japan. But do you remember having a lay put on you? And sometimes they present a bouquet of flowers to the guys in the ring for the match.
Do you remember them like dressing you with some type of like a lay or like a bouquet of flowers, kind of like really?
I more or less remember who was putting it on around my neck. A good-looking Hawaiian girl in his hula skirt and everything. Is Mickey on the phone with
let's bring Mickey aboard.
Mickey's on there.
Okay, Mickey. I just want to say one thing to Mickey. Right here on our show, him and I we go back and forth.
Right here,
you remember that, Mickey?
Right now. That's hey, good to see you, Fred and Nick. Yes, I do remember that. That was our gimmick. Right here, right now, we tried to imitate Ed Sullivan.
Right here, we have the best.
Hey, but talking about Brooks, right here, I broke in '70, and I was living at Louis Klein's gym at the time in Allen Park, Michigan, and that was always, Fred, you know, we always met there and go for our road trips and whatever. Well, they hooked me up with Brooks. Him and I made so many trips together, but some of the memorable trips, it was Brooks, myself, Donnie Fargo, and Greg Valentine. Now, can you imagine that? I was just breaking in the business and on these road trips with them, and then we'd do Dayton, and they had these nurses in Dayton, and we'd always go over to their place after the date, and that was an eye-opener for me, a real eye-opener. Donnie Fargo, my God, that was amazing stuff. But you know who really helped Brooks at the beginning was Jack Kane. Jack Kane's the one that tried to push Brooks. You know, he gave him the Killer Brooks moniker, and that was one guy that.
I think Jack Kane was relative with Dusty Rhodes.
Jack Kane, a relative of Dusty Rhodes, he believes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell the people who.
Wait a minute.
Hey, I like your beard.
That's my Corona beard.
Yeah.
You know, I just didn't shave for all this time. Thank you. Hey, Nick, you got a heck of a look.
You two guys weren't fuzzy about the women you guys weren't too fuzzy about the women you went after.
The nurses?
Who's that? Mickey and
Brooks.
Well, you get what rat you get.
You remember them nurses in Dayton, Fred?
Yeah, I almost got run out of town because I mentioned your name.
I was just going to say, Nick, you got a heck of a look, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And coming from you, that's
that was because I was always trying to be Ed Sullivan. They thought I was nuts, I guess. You know.
Mickey, tell the people who Jack King is.
But Brooks and I, Killer Brooks. Go ahead. Jack Kane was the booker for the Sheik when I broke in, and then he went opposition to the Sheik. But Jack Kane was the booker in Amarillo for the Funks at one point, and he was married to some gal, but he was the father. What do you call it? He'd be the stepfather of Billy Bob Thornton. You know, the guy, the actor.
Oh yeah.
That was Kane's stepson.
Wow.
That was his stepson.
Shit. You know, one of my favorite actors.
Yeah, and I always liked
Brooks or Jack. Yeah.
Yeah,
but Kane's the one that gave me my name, the Irish Mickey Doyle. He gave me that.
Oh wow, he named you Mickey, huh?
When they went opposition.
You got a lot of trouble with the Sheik, him, Tony Marino, and Jack Kane. They went opposition. I met with those guys outside of Columbus, and they had all kind of heat.
What kind of heat, though?
Kind of heat that put Kane in jail.
Oh.
Ooh, white heat.
Yeah, that was kind of major. How did that differ, Fred, from the promotional territory war with Dick the Bruiser's WWA? That was
that's another one. That's another one. I was in wrestling for Fritz von Erich down in Texas, and he was pushing me real good. And he says that they got opposition up there. Lewin, Bobby Davis, and Buddy Rogers. And he says, the Sheik needs you right up there. We went up there.
Killer Cox too.
Yeah, and we got our hand raised. Got him out of the territory. We whooped them.
Yeah, you whooped them, Bruce. I just didn't understand. I think it must have been over paydays or something. That must have hurt.
Yeah,
I love the Sheik, as you know.
I don't think it was paydays. I think it was
her
power struggle.
Yeah, I just snuck another one in, guys. I snuck legendary promoter, wrestling extraordinary out of the St. Louis area, Mr. Herb Simmons.
Herb, you were at my Sam Munchnick 1991 3-day weekend for the boys. Herb was a legend. We're going to be honoring you. I'm Cauliflower Alley's board photographer all these decades. We're going to be, when we have a convention, not this year, it's been postponed, because of Corona, but you are one of our top honorees this year.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thanks for everybody there, Mike. It's really kind of you. Your work is some of the top notch out there, and I always look forward to seeing your work.
Herb, I don't think Tim Brooks ever worked at Kiel. The shows I shot at Kiel, I can count on my hands and feet, but and they were spectaculars of a different sort. And the funny thing was when Sam would take off, when Munchnick would take off during the summer and not promote or have TV wrestling at the Chase, he would bring in TV from other territories, like the Sheiks, like Eddie Graham's Florida. But Sheiks TV, big time wrestling, would appear on there. So it made it even more fun when Fred might have known this thing. Fred and Mickey might know when she came in that one time to work for Munchnick, I think it was 74. And he was told not to do any fighting outside the ring. And that's the first thing he did because that was Sheik. He was banned for life as he'd been at Madison Square Garden in like 1959 with Jerry Graham, or I forget who it was. But, Sheik was Sheik. And even though he was a part of the NWA, he went to all those Vegas promoters meetings every single year. Did you hear about that, Fred and Mickey? He made Sam Munchnick.
One of the top agents that worked at St. Louis, Lou says he really loved working St. Louis. He drew some money there. He's the world champion. Yeah, I heard about that with the Sheik, but the Sheik, he was very unpredictable. But I tell you what, that dude could dress. That guy, nobody could outdress him. He dressed better than any Arab Sheik in Saudi Arabia, anywhere over the country. He had all 3-piece on silk. He had boots that were out of alligator. He had rings all over his finger.
And the medallions around his neck. He had the famous medallion.
Yeah, that's a beautiful medallion, isn't it?
Yeah, there's something else. I would rank not so much gimmick, but the way he could control a crowd. I always tell this to Dave Brzezinski. Obviously, he's not going to deny this because I saw Sheik in Honolulu against Terry Funk on top of a spectacular, the usual from Ed Francis and Lord Blair's at the HIC. But Sheik almost everywhere. Maple Leaf Gardens against Killer Kowalski, heel. I don't think there was a greater, more interesting, fun heel in the history of the biz than the Sheik. I don't care about the stuff behind the scenes. Maybe some guys weren't happy with their paydays. That's, whatever. But in terms of finessing a gimmick, living it, and being a main event draw all over the world, Japan, of course, those were the first riots when the Sheik went over there for what was then Japan Wrestling Association. Later he worked, of course, for Baba and later Onita, Baba and All Japan. But I think the Sheik for me, was the greatest heel I'd ever covered as a photographer, writer for the newsstand magazines. For all those,
one thing about the Sheik, I'm going to tell you what he told me. When I was breaking in with him, he says, "Hey, Freddie, listen to me." He says, "You go in the ring." He says, "You see what I do with my arms? I'm running around." He said, "You may not be doing anything really, but those people out there think you're doing something." He says, "Action makes reaction." The Sheik was an action guy. He had more heat going into the ring than anybody. My dad, Bull Curry, he was another guy. Knock over every chair there, and didn't matter where we're, ringside, above, and everything like. But these guys were in a class of their own. And it showed too because they packed the houses everywhere. Japan, Australia, everywhere. I mean, these guys are unbelievable.
Madison Square Garden.
Madison Square Garden.
Sumo Hall.
Boston Garden. Was there. Let's ask your son, Nick. Nick, let's ask you about your grandfather, Bull Curry, because you're a unique third-generation wrestler, as I was telling you yesterday, which I think will be very attractive to Vince McMahon and Tony Khan of AEW, and Court Bauer, MLW, and the folks at Ring of Honor, because there are so very few. It's unique. Mexico, there's lots of second generation, but very few third. And so Nick Curry, coming from that lineage of Wildman, one of the also up there, that Mount Rushmore as Bull Curry. But your dad, a finesse flying wrestler, obviously flying Fred Curry. But Nick, give me some thoughts on your grandfather. And I was asking Fred a little earlier, is there footage? We want to see footage of Bull Curry, and where is it?
Well, I do know that WWE is in control of a lot of the footage that's out there. They actually just released a couple hidden gems on him. You got the Valentine video on YouTube, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with. But we also have some old reels from like 1969 and 68, and then one of them is on February 14th. So, and I looked up the date on that, and that's Bull Curry versus the Sheik, and I believe that the Sheik gave that to you, Dad, right, for your promotion as a gift, like a tribute match. So we do have that as just finding the means to get it transferred, and finding the person and like having the trust. But like what my grandfather is to me, or like what I think about like the Wild Bull and like his legacy. Is that another question?
Yeah, because it's hard to
well, to be honest with you, it's almost unreal. It really is. It's almost unreal. It's like when you explain that, and then when you're put to that standard, that's just a whole different ball game. And then I remember when I used to grow up and I used to watch wrestling, and I'd see stuff on TV, and I'd see the Sabu, I'd see Rock, and I'd see all these guys. And then when I became of age around 12, 13 years old, then I started like dabbling into the old scrapbooks, our old mine, and then I really found out about like the great Mephistos, the gorgeous Georges, the handsome Johnny Barons, the magnificent Maurices, and then I just saw the treasure trove of wrestling history that went. I saw Stu Hart and Frankie Hart on matches with Strangler Lewis, Bull Curry, and there was a couple. There was the Casey brothers. Like John Pesic. So when I look at him. He came in through the carnivals. All right. He came in from an ethnic background that he had no help. His father abandoned him. The only thing he had was his hands and his heart, and he took that and he fought for blood, sweat, and tears are the literal of how he made what he made. And then if you look at his matches from the 1930s, and if you look at his matches from the 1940s, it goes from Nanjo Singh, Ali Baba. These are pivotal like catalysts of professional wrestling history. Then you go into the 1940s, and then he's like one of the first mixed martial art bouts. He fights the legendary Jack Dempsey. And then you go into the 50s, and then he personifies, and even way before that, he was the Bad Man champion, which is practically the biggest heel, on the circuit. Then when you go into the 50s, then you go to the Texas territory, and then how he tore up all that land, and how where you get the Brass Knucks trophy, and then kind of like that all, and then you go to Montreal, you go to Quebec, you can go to like what was it called? Capital Wrestling Alliance or Capital Wrestling, the pre-WWF.
Right.
And then even if you look at like the Jack Pfeffer and when he ran, I mean, you got Antonio Rocca versus Wild Bull Curry, Madison Square Garden sold out. The Sheik and the Sheik and Bull Curry versus Rocca and Perez, the Graham brothers. You got them all, Lewin and Curtis. I mean, he is at the epicenter and at the top of every generation and the toughest generations. When you went out there, you had to fight your way into the ring, you had to fight your way out of the ring. So like me, I hold him to a certain like superficial standard. I hold him to the Gorgeous Georges. I hold him to like it's an incredible honor to be able to be a part of that, because that guy is like on another level. He's from a different planet, and he really had that heart and soul that any warrior and 10,000 years of worthy ancestors can really look at him and be very proud, and he'll live on for years to come. And trust me, because the truth always comes out, and the truth would be coveted at many different points. And then that same thing goes for that is for my father too, because when I was growing up around this area, a lot of the kids didn't know who they were, but the teachers knew who they were. And I had a big badass football coach who was a legitimate lunatic. He was 235 pounds. He'd rip your head off. But he was the top, security guard and correctional officer, the captain at McDougal Walker, when it was the maximum security prison in Connecticut and for New England, where they had all the big murderers and, like serial killers and like gangbangers. And he said, "Oh, you're Bull Curry's grandkid." And then he told me, he was like, like how he heard stories when he was first breaking in of like, just the heart and, and how, and the man he was, and how he used to be behind the cage. And then when shit would hit the fan, he'd emerge from the cage. And then it was like a black mask would go over, they brought out their black mask to go take care of business. And it just was, he's on a different level. I mean, and it's like crazy because wrestling's for everybody. You get people in all different facets in all different countries that, and he gains new fans by the moment, even some of the, I was just telling Dad today, I said, it's beautiful. You got your fans from the past, you reconnect, but then you also gain fans because the love of the business. And how could you not love like a Wild Bull? How could you not love like, a Jack Briscoe or a Flying Fred or like a Gorgeous George or the Sheik or anything like that, And then if you just think about how dense, the wrestling talent was, the Hart families, the Von Erich families, and even before that, if you look at like guys like Louis Tillett, and you look at guys like Duke Kiyomoka, if you just look at all the territories and how pure that talent was, all those guys, I mean, that you don't have that now. It's a legend. You don't have that kind of stuff anymore.
One thing about Bull Curry, I want to tell you real quickly. We were in Detroit. We went into a diner, and anyway, at that time, it was like there's a lot of bad people there. And one of these gangsters, which I seen in action 2 days before it came over to the table, and he didn't go to me. He went to my dad. My dad had his hands under the table. He says, I want to shake your hand. He goes like that. I think he's trying to recruit me. My dad has a collection guy. My dad just stared at him and his eyes were glassy. The guy says, well, hell, I'm either going to run or stay and try to shake it. He says, I think I'm just going to run. And this guy was a legitimate bad guy. I seen him in a bar a week before, knocking a guy off the head of his mafia gang and kicking blood out of his head. But everybody was afraid of Bull Curry. Legitimately.
Bull Curry paved the way for guys that would follow and sort of mimic, but create in their own image, like Bruiser Brody, these tough guys. You guys, before I let you go, I want to have Nick plug his stuff, but Mary...
I wanted to ask Nick a question. Actually, I wanted to make a statement.
Wait, do we have Mary Freeze on? Because I want to make sure they see her before. This is Pampero Firpo's daughter. He lost the link or didn't get it. Is she aboard with us? Is Mary with us?
No, I don't see her yet.
Okay.
And we lost Bob and Bruce, too, somehow.
Okay, well, I was hijacking the show tonight anyway for our killer Tim Brooks tribute, everybody. And we lost him. He was only 72, way too young. Let me know, Sean, when Mary comes aboard. But very quickly.
Yeah, I've been watching.
Hey, but yeah, go ahead, ask away. Anybody got any questions for either me or Dad?
Where can promoters and people who want to hire you? You know, when I look at you, Fred, he has bulls, sort of the facial structure. I'm a dentist, so that's kind of what I look at. And Nick, right away, I saw Bull Curry in him.
Well, that's a
compliment.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a big compliment. I've gotten that, you know, I get that a little bit more often than not. In fact, one of our family lawyer, who took care of, you know, like my dad for, you know, generations, took care of my grandfather for generations. He came to Glastonbury to watch me wrestle. And then when I talked to him, he just was, I mean, and this is like a first class citizen, kind of like I'm a young kid at the time, like 16, 17 years old. You know, I have no, you know, recognition of like what this guy is, you know, and he completely kind of like, I saw a kid in him and I saw a fan in him from watching me wrestle. And I was kind of like flabbergasted. I'm like, what the hell? So, and he looked at me and says, man, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree sometimes. He says, man, you look like that wild bull. You know, he says, I can see it, you know, and it's a good thing to hear about that. And it's like a lovely thing to hear about that. But then that puts you to a different standard, man. But like, yeah, that's the greatest compliment I could ever get. I thank you, Mike, for that.
It was an amateur match that you won.
Yeah, and it was an amateur match that I won. I actually mauled the guy. So not only did I compliment, you know, him by, you know, looking this part, but I also complimented by performance. And it was against a tough school too.
Nick, where can
Hey, I got Mary. Mike, I got Mary.
Sean, congratulations.
Hang on, trying to get her in now.
Nick, where can people
go?
Footage
promoters that might want to hire you. How do people contact you and see your footage? You have some footage up there on YouTube?
There is a lot of footage up there on YouTube. A lot of it was up, and then some of it is down. It fluctuates, but I do have a massive things on Independent Wrestling TV, which is like, you know, pretty much a focal point for a lot of like the indie promoters that put out a lot of things. But I'm very active on Facebook. I'm very active on Instagram. I just started up a Twitter. My Facebook is just straight out Nick Curry, and then my Instagram is @_epitome prodigy Nick Kid Curry, and the same goes for Twitter. But as of late, I mean, I've been, before the quarantine, things were going in the right direction, and everything was seemingly going well, but obviously that's not the case as of now. But, you know, even for Mr. Herb Simmons, I talked to him in the past, and I've talked about coming down eventually, and that's still in my mind, and that's something that I would like to do. But yeah, I mean, I can be contacted from that, from any of those three focal points.
Let's see.
And yeah, and I'm willing to travel, and I've been making a few places, and I'm gonna pop up on a few more platforms that people are soon to see.
All right, Nick. Well, there she is.
Hi. Mary, I had to put Bruce on the side. It's only allowing me 6 for some reason.
Mary Fries Pampero Firpo's daughter, of course, very eloquent speaker on the history of the biz, as I said earlier. Happily married, has kids. She's a decorated school teacher and has Chimu with her. Fred Curry worked with your dad a billion years. She brought that out and cracked open the wood. Fred and Nick. Mary, can you see them over on the side, the far right?
I can. There's Chimu. Here he is. He lives in his velvet bag. There he is.
No, Fred remembers it. Fred.
There you go, Mary.
Fred remembers Firpo. That was.
Hey, Fred.
I always tease Al Snow sort of paid tribute to that gimmick in ECW with his styrofoam head that he called head, and he would look to it for guidance the same way that Pampero Firpo did with his legit, real shrunken head Chimu. Fred, do you remember the shrunken head Chimu that Firp had?
Yeah, I remember all that. Yeah.
And that is Mary, who Abby, when he saw her, Abdul the Butcher, about 3 weeks ago when Mary was co-host on COVID-Con, he couldn't believe that was the Firp's daughter. There were 2 daughters and 1 son. Mary, what's your brother's name again? I forget already.
My brother's name is John, and my sister that we lost in 2016 is named Julie. Hi, Nick. We talked on Facebook a few times.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Nice to see you. I got Chimu. We're just chilling. We're lounging.
it's crazy. Fast forward 8 years, and I hate to say that because it makes me feel old, and I don't want to talk about feeling old because, you know, we'll chop it right there. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's great to see you. You look the same.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's good lighting, but I had that Facebook page it was just my own personal Facebook page, and I think I got rid of it about 5 years ago. So I have a Twitter. It's P like Pompero, P Frippo with the numeral 1. And
Okay.
what I do on the Twitter is I post pictures. My dad kept about 5 or 6 dozen scrapbooks that look like this. And inside the scrapbooks, there are all kinds of clippings, a lot of stuff from Detroit. And your dad is on some of these cards, your dad and your grandfather. Here's the Sheik and Pompero Firpo main eventing against Wild Bull Curry and Luis Martinez.
Oh, wow.
And so I post a bunch of his clippings. My dad made these scrapbooks. And here's Flying Fred Curry in a tag team main event with Luis Martinez and Killer Brooks against Bobo Brazil. And so the cards, these are from Cobo, February 10th, 1973. So my dad just kept a bunch of memorabilia, and I take pictures of these and I post these on PFurpo1 at Twitter, PFurpo with the numeral 1. And of course, Chimu sometimes makes his guest appearances. He's our family shrunken head heirloom.
Yeah, so I'll definitely have to give you a check on Twitter. I just entered the Twitter world.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I guess it's a different experience from what I've heard, but I'll have to definitely check you out on that. And then I'll try to find you on Instagram and or Facebook as well, if at all possible.
I'm not on any of those things. I just have the Twitter, but a lot of the wrestling community is on Twitter, just always lots of news and different personalities. And it's great to see your dad. My dad got to talk to your dad before my dad passed, which was in January. And I appreciated what he said on the 605 podcast. So thank you for those memories that you shared. And it's always good to see both of you. It's really good to reconnect.
Yeah, and hopefully we can, we all can meet. I mean, I know I have the dreams to meet the hearts, and I have I don't like using the word dreams because it makes it seem like it's not possible. But I have the plans to meet the hearts and meet Mr. Simmons and meet you as well, and connecting with like Mickey Doyle. Like talking to Mickey Doyle is kind of like a big crazy thing. Mickey, when me and Dad go out to the Midwest, we definitely have to make sure, doesn't matter anytime, anywhere, we have to make sure we all get together because that'd be something pretty neat.
He's in Upper Michigan.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be a problem. So I would really love it if we could all stay in contact and keep in contact because it's something special. And then like this whole quarantine is just for everybody to know that we're all human and things happen. So we got to enjoy the moment and enjoy each other.
We just lost Mickey.
Oh no! Have her marry Mickey, of course. Have lots of history. And Louis Klein, the great Louis Klein, who was part of the Bastien brothers. What a great tag team those guys were. When you're talking Lou and Curtis, the Bastien, just a wealth of today. Fred and Nick, because I know for you. I hope we get Mickey Doyle back. I hope that Al Snow and Dave Brzezinski found some time tonight to call in because they were part of our Killer Tim.
I was going to ask.
What was that? Couldn't hear. I'm sorry. I must have not heard.
Yeah. I'm going to let Fred and Nick go. Larry, do you want to say anything?
Sorry, I thought there was no.
You're breaking up, Bob. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, okay. I was just going to, anyway, Mary, as my co-host tonight, I really apologize because I sent you a joint email a couple of hours ago when I got the link. I sent it to Mickey Doyle and the Curry family, and then I kept looking down. Finally got that email from you. You didn't get the link to this, so
that's okay.
I'll be here for that.
I got Mickey back.
Okay. Fred and Nick, I want to say domo arigato gozaimasu. Thank you so much for being part of our tribute. I want to obviously stay in touch with you guys. Herb, I'm going to continue to press Herb. Maybe he can hire Nick. And Nick is a future superstar in the making, international global star like his great father, Flying Fred Curry, his grandfather, the incredible Wildman Bull Curry. So with that, we're going to let you guys go because it's late. And I really want to thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us, and thanks for the consideration. Yeah, it means
real
a lot.
quick before you guys go, Nick. I just wanted to say, Tony Khan's got this guy named Marco Stunt on there, and Jungle Boy Jack Perry. You look a little bigger than Marco Stunt, even. So if he can get Marco Stunt on there,
I think
he said a little bigger than Marco Stunt. Marco Stunt's about 5'1", a little bigger.
Right?
If and when Nick goes to AEW after he works for Herb Simmons, he will destroy Marco Stunt and my good friend Jungle Boy. You know, the thing there, before I let the Currys go, is this actor from Beverly Hills 90210, Luke Perry, used to bring his son Jack up, who loved wrestling, to our shows in Northern California, or also some of the other indies. And Luke was the mark for wrestling too. This is one of the world-class actors who we lost last year, who I know Mary knows his career as the Beverly Hills 90210 and Melrose Place watcher. But he's a really super nice guy. So Nick, when you meet him, very, very nice guy. And he always lets everybody use his, what's that electroshock thing for your muscles? The portable unit. He always has that. And he lets everybody use it in the dress. He's a good guy. The thing that looks like a gun, that it gets the kinks out of your neck and your back. But anyway, so Fred and Nick, I want to let you guys go and thank you very much. And Nick, answer my email tomorrow, and we'll start working on getting you hired everywhere as the next future talent. Mickey Doyle, now I want to have you and Mary have some dialogue, because Mickey, you knew, you know everything about the Midwest, but you knew her dad, Pampero Firpo, the legend. Mickey, can you hear me? Mike Doyle. He looks frozen. He's not moving. I think, Sean, we lost Mickey.
Maybe he is. Let me see.
He's moving around a little.
Okay. There we go.
I can hear you now.
Okay.
There we go.
Mickey, let me. Can
you hear me?
I know you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got you now, Mickey.
Sean, ask Mickey to say some stuff about Firpo, even though I know this is a killer.
Yeah. Hey, can I
You're like freezing, Mickey.
Yeah, Mickey, have him refresh his browser and click on the link and come right back.
Yeah, can you hear that, Mickey? Jump out and jump back in again.
Bruce and Herb, I want to introduce you to Pampero Firpo's daughter. I know both you guys as historians. If we had Ross on, what a historian Ross Hart is. But Mary, Bruce Hart, and promoter Herb Simmons, who's carrying on the long tradition of Munchnick and Larry Matisick from St. Louis. Anyway, I don't know if you guys know each other. Mary, have you ever met Bruce of the Hart family?
I've met Ross, and I met Bob. Hi, Bob, at the PWHF event in Texas in 2018. I met Bob, so it's nice to see you again. Bob took some really nice photos of my dad and my family when we were there, so it's good to see Bob. And Ross Hart was there, and we spent a lot of time having lunch over the weekend.
Bob, where's
that was a lot of fun down at the. Bruce will be right back. That was a lot of fun. Bruce had asked me. I was going to ask you, Mary. Did your dad and Killer ever were they ever a tag team?
Honestly, I don't know if they actually tagged together. A lot of times they were working with the Sheik. I know, did they tag together?
Yeah. The footage we were going to show was of Dave Brzezinski's photos where they teamed when Brooks first adopted that character in 1971. He went through quite a few characters, and nothing really clicked until they turned him into that thing. And apparently the nickname Killer came from his uncle or nephew, Dick Murdoch. Murdoch, who was the total fan of Jerry Lee Lewis, who was known as the Killer. And so he said, well, that's my favorite singer. And he put that moniker, according to Dick Murdoch, and Murdoch told me that himself, onto his nephew, who he broke into the biz and introduced his first territory, which was Detroit. Him and Dusty Rhodes teaming. Can you imagine those three guys in the back? Killer Brooks, his relative Dick Murdoch, and Dusty Rhodes. But let's see if Bruce, there's
Mickey, your mic is not working for some reason. It says your mic is not connected. If you could jump out and then jump back into the link, hopefully it'll reconnect itself.
And Bruce?
Yeah. Anyway, let me. I don't know if
Mike,
you can do that off air with him. Bruce, I want to introduce you to Mary if you've not met her before. That's Pampero Firpo's daughter, and I think Herb knows her already, but and so does Mickey.
Hi, Bruce.
Bruce, how are you, Mary?
Hey, good. Good to see you. Bruce, there's some footage of my dad with Ross and your dad at Cauliflower Alley Club in 2001. And I put it on YouTube. There's a video, and Nick Bockwinkel and just so many different legends are there, Bobby Heenan, and it was really nice to see. I think Ross told me that my dad came to Calgary in either 1973 or 1974, but didn't stay long. But my dad told me that he got a ride back to the airport from Owen, and that Owen got a speeding ticket on the way. And then when I crossed paths with Brett in 2015 at WrestleMania, Brett said that was he himself who got the speeding ticket, driving my dad to the airport back in 74 or 75. So anyway, my dad was very fond of your family at Helen and your dad, Stu, and it's really nice to see you and connect with you.
And,
there you go, Bruce.
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. I remember your dad had a funny story. He said I'm not sure who booked him. He was having to partner this other legitimate kind of challenge type night, the great Antonio.
Yes.
And your dad, he was quite intelligent and articulate and well-read and all like that. But the great Antonio was the polar opposite of that. Your dad was telling my dad about having to kind of chaperone the great Antonio, who was, one step above being kind of like, some kind of a geek or a circus freak or something. And
he got
your dad was saying he should have got paid extra.
He got saddled.
Yeah, but I remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, your dad always impressed me because he was very well-read and intelligent. My mother actually enjoyed talking to him, and my mother was fairly articulate, but hardly ever interacted with many of the wrestlers. But both of them said they had a nice visit and were all quite fond of Pampero. So that was kind of interesting. But.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really nice to see my dad connecting with Stu at Cauliflower Alley. They just looked happy to see each other. And I know he had a lot of respect for what your dad and your family accomplished in Calgary and with the promotion, and what an institution, your family is.
Well, that's good. I think that was maybe one of the last outings I think my dad passed away about the next year or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like one of his last, kind of visits. And he really loved the Cauliflower Alley, and it seemed like it was a great opportunity for him to commiserate with like Nick Bockwinkel and Red Bastien and all those guys,
Yeah, and he saw there was Penny Banners, and like she got a real kick out of seeing your dad too. And
Penny was another one, and quite a few others. I'm not sure if there's too many around from that far back now, but old Gene LaBelle was another one my dad had a great visit with. And I'm
Danny
sure
Hodge.
he was a buddy of. Yeah, Danny Hodge was down there, and
Al Hayes. Al Hayes was at that.
I'm
one.
not sure if
Curry was there.
Who's that?
Well, Fred Curry was there, who we just had on, and Al Hayes was there because I remember taking pictures. Stu was in his wheelchair, and we had Lord Al Hayes.
Oh yeah, I remember Al was unfortunately in failing health around that time too, I recall. But a sweet guy, old Al, and there was a few other. I think Antonio Inoki may have been down there if I recall correctly, and unfortunately, Carl Lauer.
Bill Watts on a more pleasant level. Bill Watts was there.
But yeah, that was.
That's a big deal. Everybody was there. It's like we had a table, AWA table, a St. Louis table, a Detroit table, a Toronto table. Johnny Powers. Don't ask him for money. Johnny Powers was there from Toronto. And
yeah,
got Herb shaking his head on that one.
let me bring up Mickey Doyle, because Mickey, we've neglected Mickey, and I want to see if
yeah, let's see if we can get him to work again.
Mickey, do we have your? Yeah, he's moving around a little on the visual part, but do we
I
have?
don't know if you guys can hear me, but I can't hear anything.
Oh,
you can't.
Well, Sean, why don't you ask Mickey to interact with Mary a little? Does he have some thoughts on FERP or Tim Brooks that he wants to share with Mary?
Mickey, can you hear us? He's bouncing again.
He's bouncing because he's on a cell phone. That's the magic, folks, of these Zoom chats. If
Right.
you're on the most up-to-date cell phone or a laptop or a desktop,
Can't hear.
The audio and the visual part. Well, I mean, you must have heard me at some point, but anyway.
Do you have any FERPA stories you can share, Mickey?
I think they're having trouble hooking up with Mickey Doyle.
Yeah.
You might just interject and
we all are, Bruce.
Referring Tim.
You know what, Sean? Why don't you write down something? Maybe he'll see it if you show it to him. You bring us up.
Yeah, let's see if he can see this.
That way we can at least, I hate shorting Mickey on this opportunity. You see, you loved Mary's dad and loved Killer Brooks, who we rode with. That's a great road story about Killer Tim Brooks.
Guy coming on?
No.
It's Herb Snow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they can see the comments or not. Can anybody else see the comments on the side?
No, all I see
I can see those.
No.
And I hear somebody's audio sounded like a drill press.
Yeah, I think it's Mickey trying to work on his.
Why don't you bring us up all on screen? But Sean, are you able to? Because otherwise, you're going to have to lose Mickey.
Listen, Sean, I've got Sean.
What, Bob?
But we're going to have to produce this mofo.
Sean, in the meantime, I've got quite a few.
Hang on a minute, Bob.
Yeah, Bruce and I have quite a few people.
Bob, why are you guys? Your camera's all messing up. What is going on tonight?
Well, let me go to Herb Simmons. And Herb, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Mary,
hang on, Bob.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go to Herb. I'll talk to Bob on here a minute.
Okay, Mickey, I hope you can hear us. But Herb, let me have you interact a little bit with Mary, because you're also, I know you treasure history, and FERP was right up there with all those greats, and of course Bull Curry, who he teamed with and faced. And I want to ask about that great Antonio stuff. That's a whole other thing, because I think Phil told me he thought Antonio was stealing his gimmick with the long hair and the long beard, Mary. That was one of the things that Mary vividly recall. He did not like having to babysit great Antonio, and now Bruce has just reconfirmed that. Herb, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay.
There we go.
Nice seeing you, Mary.
Nice to see you too. Thank you, Herb.
Yes.
Herb in the St. Louis area. Herb, tell her a little about, or our listeners, about your history in St. Louis, because I don't know all of it. And, that's one thing I sadly don't know, is if you work with Sam or Matisic or any of those guys with all that history there.
This is actually my 47th year promoting. And
Wow.
I got to work with Sam. I'm probably one of the last that's left in the St. Louis area since Harley passed away. And in fact, I was just on the phone tonight with Terry Funk. It was his birthday this week, and I did an interview with him for our Sunday night show that we do, and we had some good talk. But yes, Larry Matisic and I were the best of friends, and we lost Larry a couple years ago. And I have all the footage from the St. Louis library that he had left to me, and I just in the last 3 weeks acquired Dick DeBruiser's TV footage, some of it dating all the way back to the 60s. So we're just trying to preserve the foundation that people like Vampiro and Curry and Valentine and Kaniski and all those that made wrestling what it was. We're trying to preserve that history here in the St. Louis area.
Herb, do you have the because I don't think the Kiel shows were filmed unless they were, Roy Shire did that. He would film certain matches and then show parts of it if he, was having somebody come back in a cage match to enhance or continue a feud. But do you have any footage either from Chase or from Kiel of the Sheik coming in, which got him banned? I think it was 74, 75, which got him banned for life. Sam mad that he went outside the ring when Sam had clearly told him not to.
I remember that when Sam sent the word down and said, pay him off and tell him to go back and I'll call him if I ever need him again. And he never did. But yeah, I don't know if he's on any of the footage. There was only a few of those matches at the Kiel and they were taped on an old 35 millimeter. I do have some of them. I don't know what the quality of that's going to be, but I have all of the matches from the Chase, the oldest dating back to 62, with Pat O'Connor and Lorenzo Perini on it and Johnny Valentine.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
John
kind
Paul Hennig was another guy probably on that show too. John Paul Hennig.
Oh yeah, John Paul Henning. In fact, I've got the tape of Bob Orton Sr.'s first match in 1959 on Wrestling at the Chase. So a lot of history there, and that's what we're doing. Like I said, of course, I promote shows up until this virus hit. We were running pretty busy, every month, and we've had them all there. Bruiser Brody, when he was with us, in fact, he was with us a week before he got killed back in 1988. Ted DiBiase, you name them, we've had them in here for a little independent wrestling promotion. We're known for bringing in the legends.
No, there's nothing better than that. Okay, Mike, I think I got Mickey to where he can at least talk. I sent him a message, and hopefully he's going to be able to talk about Pamp to Mary for a little bit.
Okay, Mickey, can you hear us? Might be a delay. Mickey, let me, before we let you go, I know we've had audio problems all night with you. If you can just talk to Mary a little bit, because you guys have not had any dialogue yet.
Hi, Mary. Can you hear me?
Hey, Mickey. I can. I know that you and my dad.
Can you hear me, Mary?
I can. Yes.
It's a problem having too many guys.
Go ahead, Mary.
I just real quick. I just want to say your dad and I would talk on the phone over the last 15 years, and we both worked in the post. Can you hear me, Mary?
Yeah, yes. We can hear you. We can hear you, Mickey.
Damn. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Can you hear me, Mary?
Yes.
I'm shaking my head. We can hear you.
Yes.
We're getting a close-up. Stop fumbling with the cell phone.
Hey, Mary, this is Mickey. Can you hear me?
You're good, Mickey.
Yes, I can hear you.
I talked to your dad.
Too many guys on the show.
Okay, I just want to say your dad and I would talk on the telephone in the last 15 years, and we both had the same job in the post office. I was working in Detroit, and he was, I think, San Jose, and we used to send Christmas cards, and I'm just saying I'm glad we got to communicate for a while.
Me too. I know you crossed paths in Detroit.
Oh, they rode around, Mary. They were on a lot of
cars. We did road trips together. And, yeah. He was the bottom line, he was a good man, and I just always enjoyed his company and would give me tips and, the whole thing an old pro would give a young guy. So nothing but good things to say about your dad.
Thank you.
That's what, Bruce, I was going to let you know, Bruce Hart, hopefully you can hear me, that her dad, Pamp, or Ferp as we called him, could speak at least 8, possibly more languages legit, not just a couple of words, but fluently, beyond Spanish and English and French. And Mary, what were the languages? There was Japanese he was learning. He may not have been.
Armenian and Spanish were his native tongues, Armenian because that was his ancestry, and Spanish because he grew up in Argentina. And then after Armenian and Spanish, it was Portuguese, Italian, English, Russian. And he learned, like you said, he knew some Japanese, and he knew a little bit of Greek and a little bit of Turkish as well, because his parents were also multilingual. They spoke Spanish, English, Armenian, Turkish, and Greek. And so he had that ability. I wish I had that gift myself, but.
Yeah, but you're an instructor, so. Plus Hawaiian. He knew some Hawaiian. I heard him give out, phrases too, like the one blah thing. Yeah, Ferb could speak a little bit of Hawaiian as well.
On track.
He always got his point across.
Listen, I was wondering.
Hey,
I want Bob here. I'd like to know, Herb. Can I ask you? Did Tim and Pampiro work for your promotion, or Sam Muchnick?
Tim worked for me quite a bit. Keller did. And I stayed in touch with him all these years. Bruiser Brody and Dick Murdoch actually was the one that brought him into my promotion. I had a great respect for Tim Brooks. In fact, I had him in last year. He drove all the way in. His sons brought him in for the Bruiser Brody Memorial. And you would have thought he was a kid at Christmas time. Barbara Goodish was there with him. And, of course, him and Brody were good friends. But in fact, I talked to him just about a month before he passed away, and no, he did a lot of good business for me.
Do you recall, guys, Mary? I did work and is that Mary? Is that your cat?
Yes.
What, does the cat have a wrestling name?
He needs. Well, yes. This is beautiful Buddy Rogers.
Oh, really?
Yes. Oh, he's not very friendly though.
Well,
Buddy wasn't friendly.
Neither was Buddy. Yeah, he's trying to get away from me.
I was going to ask Herb and Mary. I don't recall of all the jillion places Herb worked. I don't know if Herb, do you recall ever seeing him on the results for St. Louis? Boy, my lighting is pretty awful.
Yeah, what happened?
The thing I have, Mary, and you may be interested in this, I have all of the results from anybody who ever worked at wrestling at the Chase or at Kiel Auditorium, and they were all on 3x5 index cards. They would actually type out the results and who the winner was, what they won with, what the attendance was. So I will look through those results, and if I've got any with your father on them, I'll be more than glad to send you a copy of them.
Because he had some other aliases, Mary, right? He was the Wild. What was he? Wild Rasputin, Mad Russian Wild Rasputin. What was the gimmick in 50?
Oh, my dad was Ivan the Terrible. And before he became Pampero Firpo, Ivan the Terrible, Ivan Firpo, Irvin the Armenian. What else did he wrestle as? There were quite a few. Of course, the missing link in Hawaii.
That's right. And San Francisco.
Yes.
They just list him. They don't even list his name. It's just this missing link, like Hawaii.
Right.
The right.
Listen, Dr. Mike, we got several people here on Facebook Live been asking if you could tell us some stories about Killer Tim and about Pampiro. We have about 100 people ask that question of you tonight. If you can tell us a few stories.
Quick story. Yeah, it should be more Mary than me, but Tim Brooks and Ferp teamed up. Ferp was the heel his initial period until the Sheik turned on him in a tag match. Dave Brzezinski would probably have more knowledge of that because I wasn't shooting that night. But they teamed up quite a bit, usually against Marino and folks like Luis Arriba Martinez and others like Ben Justice and Stomper when they were both faces before Ben Justice turned on the Stomper. And that Stomper guy Mitchell later became Gentleman Jerry Valiant, the third Valiant brother. Also rumored to have been a half-brother to Bobby Heenan. That was not true. Both of them told me, but the boys passed that around. But the footage that we would have seen from Dave Brzezinski's photo tribute had Ferp also wrestling against Tim Brooks when Ferp turned babyface after getting hit with a fireball from the Sheik, turning face, having the big run with the Sheik, but also wrestling these other guys like Tim Brooks, who was a heel. Dave Brzezinski had this rib, not so much a rib, but a story of Tim, who did like to play ribs. But when a bunch of the Sheiks guys, including Dave Brzezinski, left to form their own. And Mickey, you could probably tell that if you can hear me. But Dave was in a mixed tag where he was the skinny. He was like 6'3", said 110 or 115 pounds. And so he put on his, a lady friend of his gave him some hot pants, pink hot pants. I forget what year this was. It was when hot pants were a big deal, 74. And he had a mixed tag. And so he's teaming with Killer Brooks. I forget who the faces were. It's Marino and I think maybe Luis Martinez. Not in the Sheiks territory, but in late 74, early 75 when they broke away. And so Tim Brooks ordered him to do, Dave Brzezinski is Motormouth Dave Brzezinski, Supermouth, was acting very aggressive, like he actually wanted to wrestle, not like the Grand Wizard Abdullah Farouk and run away, Bernie Roth. So Brooks made him, when he goes, sit down on the mat and give me some push-ups first before the match starts. And Dave said he couldn't even do more than one, but when he got down to do them, Brooks bent down without saying anything because Dave didn't know what was going on. And I guess Brooks grabbed him by the back of his pants and started lifting him up, down, up, down, up, down. So it looked like Dave Drayson, Supermouth, Motormouth Dave Drayson, as his character heel manager was, could do all these zillion push-ups. So it was very funny. I don't think I'd ever seen that. Oh, and the other thing Dave reminded me about that I'd forgotten was that Killer Brooks, while he was still with the Sheik, they would encourage fans not to yell Crazy Brooks at him. So they were stealing, not really stealing, but just borrowing the Crazy Luke thing that Luke Graham had done all over the world since like about 63, 64, was the fans would chant, Crazy Luke, Crazy Luke. So in Detroit at Cobo and the other venues, they started chanting Crazy Brooks, even though his moniker was Killer Brooks. So that kind of was very cool. And that's the only other guy I can think who ever did had the fans chant crazy at him. And that was in matches against Furp and other baby faces. I don't know if we need to let Mickey go or if we can get some better audio or somehow get him a better cell phone so we can do this hopefully the next time. We're still on there, right? Yeah. Bruce,
yeah, we're not.
Audio, and I may want to let, because I know this is kind of getting to be a cluster, the audio is not working tonight. Mary, do you have some stuff to plug or some cherries or some thoughts as a school teacher and a parent? How can parents continue to teach their kids during the summer months? There's no summer school, physical summer school. I don't know if there's online summer school depending on the district.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's hard, I'm a parent myself of a seventh grader and a fourth grader. And
screwing up.
One of the things
I'm still on, but the microphone's not working on their end.
And now
am I
now it is, Mickey.
Oh, there he goes.
Well, let Mary talk just one person at a time. Mary, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I just was going to say that as a parent myself, I teach sixth grade and I have a seventh grader and going into eighth grade, going into fifth grade. And I think one of the important things, at least with my own children, is trying to make sure that they're practicing the basic skills, but also supporting their socio-emotional right now, because they're going through a lot of stress and changes. And that's a really important component as well, that sometimes it's hard for kids to concentrate on the academics because they're so worried about the environment and the uncertainty. And so I'm doing the best I can to try to stay cool, calm, and collected, and trying to reassure the kids that this too shall pass, and that, we're all here together. And it's important not to overlook the socio-emotional piece along with the academics, but there are certainly plenty of good resources online for math. There's something called Khan Academy that's really popular, and Bill Gates is a proponent of it, and it's free. It's KHAN, Khan Academy, and it's kindergarten through 12th grade, and kids can create an account, and that's just outstanding. A lot of really fun tutorials and things on YouTube that make things kind of like cartoons or high interest and visual with examples for the kids. So depending on how the kids learn, there are just so many great resources online with videos and audio info and examples and bright colors. And it's just important to try to stay connected and to be encouraging. I know that's so hard for so many of us right now.
Well said, well said. And remember too, I think a lot of
Mary.
Bruce and Bob have some questions for Mary, I do believe,
Sure.
Mike.
Okay. Bob, go ahead.
Hi, Mary. I've got a Facebook message here from a longtime viewer, Len in Edmonton, Alberta, and Len says he wants to know how a guy who looked like a monster like Pampiro could have such a beautiful daughter like you. That's from Len in Edmonton, Alberta.
Thank you. Hi, Len. Thank you. Well, he did clean up nicely. Thank you.
If you guys saw him when he shaved off the beard and the hair, normal looking guy, but he worked to create that character. And so that's why before anybody else, way before great Antonio or the not so great Antonio, he was unique in that respect. Nobody had long hair like that then. Not the Kentuckians. They came way, way, way later. So, and he was beautiful on the inside. He's just super intelligent guy in a world where there's always been, and seeing it today with the speaking out movement, there are some less than admirable. It's wrestling, so you have your good and your bad. But Ferp was, as we said at his memorial that Mary and her brother and her whole family put together, but particularly Mary and John, was that the boys called him Saint Ferp. So that tells you something about the way he was respected and the character that he put forth and what the boys saw in him away from the ring, whether he was heel or face. That's, just that small part of his life, the business, but the other part was the part that people respected and loved. Bruce, Bob and Bruce, do you guys have any other questions? We want to let Mary go because I think the audience.
Yeah, I have about a dozen, and I promised all these guys that I would read these out in the show here. So I like to start maybe with a few of them. What's wrong, Sean?
Nothing.
What's wrong?
Huh? Oh, I'm just getting tired. I'm good. Just tired. Sorry.
Okay, I got one here. I got one from Manny Fernandez, the great Manny Fernandez. I'm going to read this from Manny. A man killer, Tim Brooks. God, probably one of the most unique and funniest angles with Southwest Championship Wrestling for Joe Blanchard. He came to me and asked me what would piss off the Hispanic people more than anything. Well, I came up with this dumb idea that we would go next door to a Mexican restaurant and get a bowl full of refried beans and in a sack and come out and say he had something for me. So we did this interview with Steve Sachs, and we had the sack with refried beans in it. He told me that he had a present for me. I looked up in the stack, and he smeared all over refried beans on me over my face. And then just it looks like he pissed off quite a few of my Hispanic friends. Tim had an almost 6-month run and selling out everywhere because of a bowl of refried beans. That to me was one of the funniest things I ever did in pro wrestling. I'll be damned if it didn't work, because Killer Tim Brooks' work, it's perfect. He's a hell of a man. That's quite a story from Manny Fernandez. I've got another good story here.
Which place is your dad?
This is from NWA.
Go ahead, Bob.
Storm.
I have Tim Storm, NWA star with Billy Corgan. Tim Storm, Texas guy. He said Killer was a man that was successful in every aspect of the business. As a wrestler, promoter, and a trainer, I wrestled for him for quite a while at the promotion here owned in Texas. I knew that I wasn't going to get rich on the money I made in Waxahachie, but that's not what why I went there. I got rich in knowledge. I made that trip so I could get better. To sit under the learning tree. Sometimes that came in the ring, psychology, and perhaps it came in the form of great stories about the territories. But I always came away with something new and valuable. I came back off the road having worked with someone with a killer story, ex sheepherder Luke Williams. I'd ask Killer about the tale. Some of them were so epic that I thought they had been exaggerated. But Killer would laugh and say, "Yep, that's exactly what happened." Killer Tim Brooks was a veteran, a great man, a great teacher, and a legend. Watch his matches now, and you will see a wrestling clinic. What you one should be able by watching is a great friend and a mentor. Tim could be rest in peace, my friend. That's from the great Tim Storm, and I've got a few others, but we'll come on, say a few more later.
Okay, I want to let Mary go. Mary, Tim Storm works for Smashing Pumpkins lead singer founder Billy Corgan, who's come to some CACs, and he owns now the NWA. He has that weekly great TV show on Tuesdays. They're not producing right now, but they have a ton of free episodes you can watch on YouTube. And
yeah, I'm familiar. with Tim Storm and the promotion. Yeah,
isn't it kind of weird that back in the day, the only celebrities I knew, and well, going back to the 50s, Bing Crosby and Bob Hope would go to see Gorgeous George once I got a term in LA, but Debbie Harry from Blondie and Andy Kaufman, the fantastic great comedian, they were like big time wrestling marks. Obviously, the famous photos of them with Lou Albano backstage at Madison Square Garden. I don't know. I thought at least Debbie Harry was at the Boston Garden. Her dad was there. So now to have somebody like Billy Corgan and these great rock stars, Lars Fredrickson from Rancid, or Chris Christopherson, or Luke Perry, the late Luke Perry. What would your dad make of? Like, I know we were looking at him and trying to get his reaction, looking at this mass of people at Levi's Stadium, for example, at that WrestleMania in 2015 from the press box. What did your dad make of now seeing masses of people and seeing celebrities, whether it's Billy Crystal and Danny DeVito or Carl Reiner, who we lost the other day, who was a friend of Fred Blassie, all these celebrities now, would he like say, wow, I got out of the business too early? Or would he just be proud that these things finally wrestling is mainstream?
You know what's interesting is, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay. What's interesting is when my dad started wrestling, he came from Argentina and he traveled all over South America, and he was, believe it or not, he crossed paths with so many celebrities. Wrestling is such a universally beloved sport that when he was traveling in South America, he stayed in the same hotel as the Perones, as Juan and Eva Perón. And he said that when he came to the United States in the 1950s, he was on a train with different movie stars like Kim Novak and different, that's the one name that comes to mind. And he also said when he worked for Paul Bosch in Houston that George Bush Sr. was a frequent, George H.W. Bush was a frequent attendee at the wrestling matches and was a close friend of Paul Bosch. So I don't think he'd be surprised at all by the celebrity. You know, he visited in his career 5 different continents in 21 countries. And even in his heyday, which was the 60s and 70s, wrestling was beloved by athletes and entertainers. You know, he was great friends with the boxers like Jack Dempsey and Joe Louis, and he crossed paths with Rocky Marciano and Max Baer and Jimmy Braddock, all the boxing champions from that era. And so I don't think he'd be surprised at all. He always loved wrestling, and he loved the boys, and he was just always really glad to see a good house. You know, he just was thrilled by that. So he went to a couple of house shows in San Jose when the WWE came to town in the late 90s and saw The Rock and Steve Austin and Mick Foley and Kurt Angle. And he always just said he didn't watch a lot of the modern wrestling, but he just said he was so glad to see the interest in wrestling and the packed houses and just the money for the performers. And I don't think he'd be surprised, you know, when he was at Levi's Stadium he was just pleased. And, he wrestled at Madison Square Garden and different venues in front of thousands of people. So I think it just kind of came with the territory. And he wasn't anybody who was ever really starstruck. He was very down to earth and could connect with anybody. And even if he didn't speak the same language, he always got his point across. So I hope that answers the question.
I think I meant more the masses of people, because a lot of people may not have admitted that they did watch, but they may not have admitted it. So like when the Inoki Ali thing was taking over Wild World of Sports around 76 on ABC, that was huge for us. We just didn't get a lot of mainstream. Or Andre, he was to have been on the Andre was supposed to have been on the Tonight Show and Carson was there, but instead I think it was Mike Douglas who filled in. He was a sub that night. But now we have the Kardashians almost on every talk show. The Kardashians of wrestling, the Bella twins, Brie and Nicole, on almost every week. They have a best-selling book out now on the New York Times list. I mean, Cena and Rock and all of these guys, Mick Foley on the Daily Show, stuff like that. We just didn't have that kind of mass media with the wrestlers, and I'm sure your dad would have been tickled with that, because actually, they did have 100,000 packed seats in India. Gama Singh and Dara Singh wrestling, Fez and folks like that, Bill Miller, and I know your dad wrestled in front of huge crowds, sold out Madison Square Garden and Boston Garden and stuff. But that was the Mecca. But now with a stadium that has like 90,000 or 85,000 people, I'm sure at some level in him that a mind blowing. Wow.
Yeah.
Dr. Mike, I have a question here from a guy named Bobby Valandi, Queens, New York. And he said when Killer Tim went to Texas, was his interaction with the Funks and the Von Erichs?
I don't know, because I know I was just watching stuff of him mostly in Houston, wrestling with against Mark Lewin, teaming for something with Bruiser Brody, who, again, the weird thing, Mary, I don't know if you heard me, but Herb, you might not have heard me, when a couple of years later, after Killer Tim Brooks left Detroit, he went up to Montreal and was working for the Rougeau Lutte promotion. Lutte, that word means wrestling in French, Lutte International. And by then there was a previous promotion, but he wrestled up there as Buster Brody, Bruiser Brody's fictitious brother, managed by the Creature and his son, Floyd, father and son heel managers, which was weird. So I don't know about the relationship with the Funks. I don't actually know. I think Killer Tim Brooks worked about 3 weeks in Amarillo for the Funks. I don't know if Dory Sr. is still alive, because we lost him in '73. But I know he had good rapport with everybody in Houston. I just don't know his tenure in Dallas all that well, although he won a bunch of Fritz's titles there. Or San Antonio, actually he did very well, and he was friends with everybody there, from Tully Blanchard to Gino Hernandez, pretty much everybody that was in that area. And the sheep herders, the Kiwis, later known as the Bushwhackers, there as well. So I don't know if anybody knows.
And Dr. Mike, what, as far as Killer Tim, did he work with Brody and guys like legends like Stan Hansen? Maybe I could ask you, and maybe Herb.
He teamed with Stan and Brody in parts of Texas, mostly for Bosch, and also obviously Japan. I'm pretty sure for Baba. When I say, well, you know what? I'll talk to Herb off air or later on about stuff and Terry Funk, because I don't know if anyone on our panel knows the rapport between the Funks and Tim Brooks, but we can go right to the horse and ask Terry as well. Before I forget, Terry's been in we've been in a lot of pain since he lost his wife Vicky, but Terry's had knee ailments and stuff. I forget how old he is now. He's above the age of 72. How is Terry Funk's health right now? So we're all kind of obviously concerned about him.
He's like I said, I just did an interview with him tonight, and he's got an abdominal hernia is what his problem is, and that's been affecting him for the last year and a half. But his spirits is good. Like I said, we talked about the wrestling. We talked about Tim Brooks. We talked about Bruiser Brody, the feuds with the Funks and the Briscoes. Just great. He put St. Louis over like $1 million because him and all the other guys said, but when you made it on top, you made it to St. Louis. And he talked about 40 minutes tonight about just a career. We talked about Tim Brooks, how he liked him. He liked, of course, Bruiser Brody. They went to played football against one another. Said one of the roughest days he had is when he looked across that line and had heads up with Bruiser Brody. He knew he was in for a long football game, but he's doing okay.
And the thing about before Bob, hold on one sec. With Herb Munchnick, I got to tour. Sam gave me a tour of the office in '75 and then '76 and '77. But the thing about St. Louis, it was like Japan, and when you were a hugely credible athlete, sort of like a Vern Gagne type athlete, that's when you got to work in St. Louis. So really the cream of the crop came in there, and that's why, top to bottom, as was Honolulu, as was obviously any of the promotions in Japan, it was an honor that the boys coveted. They wanted to work in St. Louis. They wanted to work in Japan, Hawaii, Florida for Eddie Graham, because these were the places where you knew, as Herb said, you had made it when you hit these, particularly the Kiel Auditorium, which is a real mecca. And that's why Sam he didn't have gimmick wrestlers. He'd have show after show, Briscoe, Dory Jr., etc. Those type of high caliber 5-star matches where there'd be a lot of holds. There wouldn't be funny business outside the ring. So that's kind of why you got PO'd at Chic. I'm sorry, Bob, you were going to say something?
Okay, yeah, I got another comment, and I have a question for Herb, and this is from a guy named Chris in Johnson City, Tennessee. He'd like to ask Herb Simmons, what made Killer Tim Brooks such a great heel? Chris, Johnson City, Tennessee.
The Sheik. Month before Killer passed away, I talked to him. I called to check on him, and we talked about that, and he gave the Sheik all the credit in the world of taking him up to Detroit and taught him how to be the big heel that he turned out being.
Great, and I've got another Facebook message here from Bullman Downs. He wrestled with Killer. He says, I was fortunate to be the first wrestler Tim trained. That began a 30-year friendship. More than that, a family bond. Tim is a Hall of Fame wrestler and is in the Hall of Fame. Is a Hall of Fame human. Thank you for everything we have meant to each other. I will miss my brother every day until we meet in heaven. Rest in peace, my brother. That's from Bullman Downs.
Who wrestled for Fritz. He wrestled for Fritz's territory once Tim had trained him. Tim's promotion, by the way, in his school, I think he ran it for like 30 years, was called the NAWA, North American Wrestling Association, if I'm not mistaken. And he came to two Cauliflower Eyes, both times with Gary Hart, who, super close with, who they did all that work in various territories. Obviously, Dallas being the big one, but Gary also managed. Few people, Mary, forget that Gary Hart, Playboy Gary Hart, managed one of his first gigs was with bleach blonde hair, working for the Sheik in Detroit and managing lots of heels there. I think he initially, Mickey dwells back with us. Can you remember who Gary Hart managed in Detroit? Did he manage Rhodes and Murdoch as heels in 1968, 69? Or Mickey, can you hear us? I don't think Mickey can hear us, so we're video apart again. Well, anyway, Gary Hart had history with your dad. He was there at the same time. He didn't manage Furp, but Gary Hart was there as well. Yet another guy with history. Everybody had history with Pampero Firpo, obviously.
Oscar in Quebec City or somewhere.
Is Tim? Can Tim hear me? I've got a question here from a guy in Lansing, Michigan.
Mickey.
Mickey. This is for Mickey. I'm sorry. Yeah, Mickey.
Yeah, we're not able to get Mickey. He's not. I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Well, that was from. That was a guy, Mark Mark Boujan in Lansing, Michigan. But
yeah. Mark is a good guy. Mark, historian, has done lots of stuff in the business. Mark, I'm sorry. Does Mark Bouchon have a question or comment?
No, he had just wanted to ask about the best match that Mickey had with Tim in his wrestling days in Detroit.
That would have probably been later on when they all broke off with Dave Brzezinski and formed that promotion for I'm not sure how long. I can't remember Fred Curry. It sounded like they didn't last more than 2 years, but they did have television in Detroit.
Have you heard anything from Dave?
Okay.
Mike, have you heard from Dave?
Which Dave? Meltzer?
To see if he was going to be able to come on or not?
Oh, no. They had guests, because he's got that $6 million wine store and stuff. They were entertaining guests and wine buyers. So he's got the link. I sent him the link. I mean, I even sent Abdul the Butcher, Abby, the link as well. Mary was my co-host, and we did the thing COVIDCon about a month ago with Abby, who did show up. We had to do like 2 hours of practice. So next time with Nikki, we'll practice for 2 hours. But if you have not a brand new cell phone, if you have a couple-year-old cell phone, these kind of Zoom chats just aren't going to work. You can see, like Mary, you on a laptop or a
cell? Yeah, I had the same technology issues because I teach 6th grade and we went online with distance learning in March. So same thing, we were using Google Classroom and Zoom and StreamYard, and the students would glitch in and out. Sometimes I'd be instructing and I would glitch in and out. So I understand all the technology issues and difficulties. It's just good to be part of the panel.
So it's not us. It's just the Okay.
It's not you. Sometimes it's the connectivity. It's just it's a challenge, but it's so nice to be here reflecting. Bullman Downs that you mentioned earlier. I know Bob saw him too at the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in Texas in 2018, and he gave me Tim Brooks' phone number to connect with my dad. And we were able to have them on the phone with each other probably about 6 months before my dad passed away. And that was a real treat. I was listening in on speaker, and Tim's wife, Julie, was there also in the background. And my dad and Tim were talking shop and just kind of reliving some of the memories and of their experiences. And it was really nice to hear them talk. You could tell how much Tim loved the business and how much all those fun adventures that he had meant to him. And I saw a quote on Twitter the other day that somebody asked Tim Brooks what he would do if he had $1 million. And I love this answer. He said that he would just probably keep wrestling until he spent it. So you could tell he was somebody who had a great love for the business. And it was nice to have him connect with my dad before they both passed away. I'm sure they're up there. I was going to say sharing a cigar. My dad didn't smoke, but, he'd have a beer with him.
and Mary, Bob here again. I've got 2 more messages. I got one here from Tiger Conway Jr. in Houston, and he said he and his dad had such high respect for your dad, and he was one of the really good guys to work with, and he also had Tiger's dad, Tiger Sr. had great respect for Tim Brooks, one of the real good guys in the business, and that's from Tiger Conway Jr. But I have another Facebook message just came in from James Beard, one of the great referees in wrestling. James, a quick message here. Lots of folks are commenting about Killer. I'm happy to see the outpouring of respect. He deserves that. I feel blessed to have had the chance to see and visit with him several times in the last few months. We shared our feelings about each other face to face, and I can't be unhappy about that. He knew this day was coming, and he faced it like the man he always was. He made it known that he was ready for it, but that he didn't keep him from fighting it like the competitor he was. As well, he said he remembers Pampero Firpo a couple of years ago, and hello to Mary from James Beard.
James has a book out, I believe, or it came out a couple of years ago. So, guys, please search for that. I just kind of want to apologize. As I've done in the past, I've sort of hijacked the show, and I wanted to do a Killer Tim Brooks tribute because we lost him a couple of days ago. But I know we've gotten off topic a little bit here and there, and I wanted to do that before we lose Mary. I wanted to let Mary know that when you were talking about George Bush Sr., Sean, I don't know if you can bring up the visual part, but Bush was invited to his inauguration, only president once, his inauguration, again, Bush Sr. He invited Tiger Conway Sr., I think Tiger Jr. went with him, and Paul Bosch and a few other wrestlers in the territory. But we also had, so we were talking about mass media, pop culture wrestlers in that. You remember Jimmy Carter, when he got elected, they made all this.
Oh, I think I found it, Mike.
Okay, hang on, let me finish. They made a fuss about Lillian Carter, Jimmy Carter's famous mother, the president's mother, loving wrestling, pro wrestling, and watching WTBS every Saturday. Her favorite wrestler was Mr. Wrestling 2. So he was also invited to Jimmy Carter's inauguration, but because he would have had to come without a mask and been identified, he didn't want to play gimmick. So he missed out on that big opportunity. But the big famous photo was not just of Lillian Carter putting a headlock on Mr. Wrestling 2, Johnny Walker, who we lost about a week or so ago, but also Jimmy Carter himself putting a headlock as president on Mr. Wrestling 2. That was huge, as Bruce knows, Bruce Hart knows. We just did not have that kind of recognition amongst the mainstream that we do now. And we take it for granted, The Rock is going to be on Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert and blah, blah, blah. Now we take it, it happens all the time, but back then it did not happen that much. And that was what made it an even bigger deal, why we pay tribute to folks like Hana Kimura, who was on that reality show, but a bigger star for Stardom, to Johnny Rubberman Walker, who was Mr. Wrestling 2, obviously Pampero Firpo, who did tons of TV himself all over the world, and of course our guy tonight, Killer Tim Brooks. I'm sorry, Bruce or Bob. Before
can you see that? Can you guys see this?
I don't see anything because you only have the visual of Bruce and Bob on.
Oh, hold on. That's where I goofed. How about now? Can you guys see that?
No.
What are we seeing?
I got that video of Killer Tim Brooks.
Oh, because that'll answer the question, because he's in a lot of photos with Firpo, both teaming and against Firpo in a bloody match. Where is the visual? Because it's not on our screen.
You guys still can't see it?
No, we just see you, me, Herb,
Dang.
Bruce, and Bob, and Mary. I was hoping, Mary, I had sent that.
I tried.
Yeah, no, you tried, Sean. I appreciate it. Mary, I better let you go. Anything else? I'm sorry. Tonight's been a little bit of a cluster with various audios. I'm sorry Mickey Doyle didn't get to talk to you more, but he did get to talk to you a little bit, which was great.
Yeah, it's been great. I just I want to say thank you again for having me on, and I appreciate all of the efforts by each of you to keep this historical era of wrestling alive and to preserve those stories. They're so important. And like you said, now that there's the Bella twins and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of wrestling fans, millions throughout the world, it's so nice to remember the people who paved the way, like in my dad's generation, Tim Brooks' generation, the people before that. So thank you to all of the fans who tune in and share their stories and memories. And thank you for all your efforts to keep everything alive. The Hart family and Bob took those pictures of my family and me that we just cherish. It's one of the last times we really had a nice celebratory get together before my dad passed. And thank you, Herb, for promoting and giving all the young talents a leg up in the business and all the efforts you've done, and Mike too. So just so much gratitude and love for each of you. And thanks for having me on. It's such a pleasure to be part of it. And again, I said in the beginning that I have a Twitter that honors my dad. It's P-Firpo, P-F-I-R-P-O with the numeral 1, P-Firpo1 at Twitter. And always love hearing from fans and their stories and pictures they send me. So thank you to everyone. I hope everyone's hanging in there and staying healthy.
Mary, why don't you?
Mary, listen, we'd love to have you, Mary. We'd love to have you join us on just you and Bruce and whoever, and just talk about your dad on a show in the next couple of months.
Anytime. Okay. I love telling stories about him. So you don't have to twist my arm for that one. Actually, before I log off too, I have one of his ring jackets with me. We donated some things to the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, including some of his ring gear. But this is one of my favorite jackets. And when you saw my cat, Buddy Rogers, he was kind of trying to lay on the jacket. So anyway, I have some of his memorabilia that I cherish and I share. And I'm so grateful that people are interested in seeing that and interested in sharing their memories. It means a lot to me.
That was his zebra. Remember that clear? Can you hold it up a little better?
Sure.
That was his zebra thing. I can't remember if it had sleeves or no sleeves.
This was one that had sleeves, but he did have the vests and things that didn't have sleeves. And it was always some kind of wild zebra print or leopard print. And somebody told me that my dad wore you probably told me, Mike, that he used to just wear trunks without that, like the tank top style, like the
tunic. I think it was tunic.
What's that?
I think it was called a tunic. He had.
Yeah. Somebody told me that he started covering up his torso after he had that big injury when he was in Hawaii. He had a huge abdominal scar that kind of went up and down the middle of him. So after he had that injury, he started kind of covering up with the tank top over the trunks. But anyway, I love hearing all the stories. So thank you for sharing them with me.
Well, apologies to your family for dragging you to do these things all the time. So we got to thank Mary's family, her husband, her kids for putting the wrestling spouses never get the appreciation and love.
Too, I wanted to say to Bob, Tiger Conway Jr. and Sr. were just great friends of my dad's. He wrestled. I have multiple cards with Tiger Conway Sr. on them that, again, I posted on Twitter from my dad's collection. He kept all of these scrapbooks, and I just love going through them and posting just some of his different memorabilia. This is from Body Press, but he has things from all over the world and all different decades that he wrestled in, including some memorabilia from Tiger Conway Sr. And it was really good to meet Tiger Jr. and to see him again in Texas. So anyway, lots of love to him too. And thank you for having me on.
And Mary, just before you go, Tiger is a regular guest on Heartbeat, our old show, Heartbeat Radio. And he spoke so many times about your dad. I know
thank you.
A great relationship.
If Mary comes on again, Tiger can come on.
Maybe we can get Tiger to come on when you're on the next show.
Yeah, I would love that. I love Heartbeat Radio. I'm a huge Hillbilly Jim fan. I love Hillbilly Jim. And I know, Bruce, that you were one of the original mentors. I heard your interviews with Hillbilly Jim on Heartbeat Radio, and it just always makes me smile. What a great guy. I love hearing those stories. And Hillbilly imitating Stu, imitating Luther Lindsay. It's just the best. So thank you. I'd love to be on the show anytime. I'm a big fan of the show.
Hillbilly and Tiger.
Mary, you know that Hillbilly Jim.
We'll get Hillbilly on the show.
Oh, I'd love that. What a great guy.
Mary, Hillbilly Jim had that show. I don't know if it on Sirius XM. It's like a weekly rock and roll history show. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, on Sirius XM, the Moonshine Matinee.
The last thing was you got to start thinking about doing a book on Ferb.
What a personality. Yeah, I asked my dad about that. He was just so kayfabe his whole life that he said he just would take all the stories with him when he passed. He didn't give me a lot of the gossip, unfortunately. So
well, it doesn't have to be gossip. Oh, too bad. Well, whatever. I'm sure I'll be involving you in my Abbey book if Mr. Reliable. If we get that going, we can have
anything for you, Dr. Mike. You know that. Thank you for being such a good friend.
Muchísimas gracias, Niga.
Okay, thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Now, Herb, I want to apologize to Herb. I didn't know that Herb was booked for the show, so I apologize if I neglected Herb in any way.
That was the last minute. I threw a snafu in.
No problem.
Oh, okay. Herb, I want to make sure, I'm going to throw this out now. Sean, maybe you could bring up the regular graphic because poor Mary is still on Chevy Chase on Saturday Night Live.
Not quite ready for prime time.
Well, you remember Chevy Chase when he'd do the news, and sometimes, it was time for the camera to exit, but they would just linger on him and like crawl under the table, to escape. So Herb, I'm going to give you my email address. And I don't care if it goes out to the, everybody has it anyway. I've had this email address since like 91, 92. It's reallano@aol.com. So Herb, I've got a zillion shots of you with various cauliflower and other stuff. You might want to see my photos. You may not.
Okay.
Sam's office, but it's spelled WREALANO, Reallano with a W in front at AOL.com. If you give me a shout tomorrow, I'll try to start digging up photos, my favorite St. Louis matches I shot, like a 1 hour Broadway Harley, Dory, the one where Harley lost his boot, or I think on the same card, beat Jack Briscoe for the Missouri title that elevated Dick Slater to the heavens. That was like 75 or 77. Or the rematch, I shot the match in Japan, Baba Briscoe, but then the rematch, the title rematch at Kiel Auditorium. And on that same card, I think, was Harley's first title defense to a young Ric Flair, the NWA title challenge. So, everything was happening in St. Louis. That was the place for United States wrestling, and amidst a lot of great places, again, like Florida, etc., even San Francisco, with all those great sellouts at the Cow Palace.
Well, I'd appreciate whatever you have, because one of the ideas that a couple of us are kicking around is because we've got so much of this footage from the St. Louis, and plus now with the Bruisers, that we're talking about doing another local TV, showcasing some of our local talent, of course, with what we do, but then adding in the Legends matches, kind of what Larry and I did with some of the footage. We had about 300 episodes we put out there, and then we reproduced them, and then we put the DVDs out for sale. But we're talking with a local St. Louis station now, and if that materializes, then we'd like to have some good promo shots of some of those matches that you took. That just adds the credibility and also the historical involvement of what St. Louis was.
But there was fun there. Oh, hang on one second, guys. There was also fun there. I have a shot backstage at Kiel, and Brody is combing his long hair, getting ready for his match, and Flair and Patera came in on Jim Crockett Jr., I think it was Jim Crockett Jr.'s private plane to Kiel, and they're like goofing behind him, and Brody doesn't know they're behind him, and I've got the mirror that's picking up Patera, and to a lesser extent, there's Dick the Bruiser with Bobo. Flair are like goofing behind tough guy. I would never do that because we all know Frank Goodish was legitimately tough.
Yeah.
But it was just sort of the love and the brotherhood, thing. They knew he wasn't going to be upset because he did all kinds of stuff. Anytime I'd ask him, he'd pretend to strangle somebody backstage for the photos for Japan.
Sure.
But a lot of great memories backstage there, and then particularly at the Kiel too. Here's just one story I'll throw out there, or at the Chase Hotel. And to my knowledge, I didn't, as I said, maybe I don't know, a handful on the two hands of Kiel shows. But didn't the boys after the Kiel shows go to the Chase Hotel and the bar?
Yep.
So
sure
that's where we were, and Heenan held court there, and the room was just packed with talent. That was on the show where Pat O'Connor and Ray Stevens, an unusual Ray Stevens appearance on a Kiel show. He and Nick came in for a little bit, I think, heralding the Von Erich kids who would follow not that long after, and the Oates brothers and stuff. But the room was packed at the Chase Bar after a Kiel Friday night show. I think it was the Friday night because Wrestling at the Chase, the TV, was Saturday. Heenan and Pat O'Connor and Ray Stevens and Bruiser and Bobo and Rocky Johnson, I think, was there, and Harley and Dory and Jack Briscoe and Slater and on and on. But the guy everybody was focused on was Heenan, because I think some marks had come up to him and asked for his autograph or something. he rebuffed them as only Bobby Heenan could do. And, just a lot of, when you look at that stuff, even as a photographer for the magazines or whatever, you still mark out at the level of talent. And Kiniski too was on there, like the Kiniski. What was it? Kiniski and Jack Briscoe against the Funk Brothers at wrestling at the Chase. That tag bout that's still historic in terms of legend quality. Or Johnny Valentine. Anything with Johnny Valentine at Kiel, just really.
A guy like Johnny Valentine, I remember he used to walk out from behind that black curtain at the Kiel Auditorium and take that long, methodical walk to the ring and get inside, have that long red bathrobe on, and just put his hands on his hips and do a 360, and the crowd would stand for 5 minutes cheering for him. No music, no nothing like that.
I miss those days. It was like San Martino, no nothing. He didn't even have a ring robe like Valentine did. And the place would go bananas. You needed double earplugs. And now they have to do all that other stuff. I'm not criticizing, but those guys could get the reaction they wanted, whether it was heat or beloved reaction, literally just because they were themselves and they had that connection with the fans. You didn't need the girls, your arms, or any of the junk.
One quick story, I've seen so much of and met so many of these guys, but one of the greatest honors I had was, speaking of Brody, I had Lou Thez on the card as a special guest referee, and they were working a big angle in Japan, and Lou was going to be over there. And so the afternoon before our show at the Belclair Fairgrounds in Belleville, Illinois, Frank and Brody got in the ring. In fact, there are some pictures out there that the Japanese photographers actually came over and took. But Larry Matisek and I got to sit there for an hour and watch Lou Thez and Bruiser Brody work out in the ring. And I'll never forget to this day, after it was over with, Lou went back, put a chair up against the wall, and did about 160 push-ups off of that. And we asked Larry, how was it in there? And he said, I'll tell you one thing. He said, when that old sucker gets a hold of that wrist, you're going wherever he wants you to go. Mm-hmm. So, it was a highlight just watching the two greats of Lou Thez and Bruiser Brody work out.
Was that in front of fans, or was that a private?
No, that was us. That was the afternoon before we had our show that night. In fact, the main event was Bruiser Brody against Killer Tim Brooks.
Wow.
And Herb, I've got a question here from a young man who said he met you down at the Waterloo, Iowa event at the Dan Gable Museum. He had a real nice dog. His name is Jamie from Waterloo, Iowa. And he wants to ask you, Herb, guys like Killer Tim Brooks and Brody were such great workers in their day and such fantastic performers. Can you see any modern wrestlers of the, say, 2020 who will ever emulate those two guys? That's from Jamie, Waterloo, Iowa.
No, though they threw the mold away when those two guys left. I told you last year I had Tim Brooks in part of the Bruiser Brody Memorial, and along with Killer Tim Brooks, I had Ronnie Garvin and Cowboy Bob Orton, and we had a wrestling seminar that afternoon before the big show. And of course, at that time, Killer was in his electric scooter. But I got to tell you, we had about 15 students that had signed up for that seminar. And even Ronnie Garvin and Bob Orton was impressed that here Killer Brooks got up out of that motorized chair and was standing at ringside and was actually showing these students the proper way to apply a headlock. And not only that, the facial expressions that you got to show the crowd. And and he wasn't supposed to do that. He was just more or less going to sit there and critique him. But he got up there and at ringside and just really, and the students were just amazed with him. But no, they threw the mold away when the Tim Brooks. And I tell a lot of these, told Terry Funk just tonight, it's a shame that the business isn't using people like him and Jerry Briscoe and our legends that are still with us to be working with. Right now, we got younger guys teaching younger guys, and what are they teaching them? High spots. There's no psychology.
Nothing.
Or we need a Bruce Hart to teach them.
Well, Bruce is one of the most brilliant.
We've been pushing that one for a couple of years, trying to get Bruce a job.
Yeah.
Herb, I'm gonna take off. I'm just kind of tired.
Okay, listen, Dr. Mike, I have one quick question.
Hang on 1 second. I wanted to say this to Herb. Tim Brooks, and we hadn't mentioned this, had been battling various cancers and stuff quietly the past 10 years with a great braveness and courageousness. So it wasn't corona or anything like that. From my understanding, it was the 10 years of fighting various cancers. You know what? I was going to ask you too, another legend of Kiel, who I was Eddie Einhorn's photographer of the IWA in '75, but I was going to ask you, a legend of Kiel, Cowboy Bob Ellis. Is anyone in contact with him? There is another guy, since we lost Fur, one of the oldest surviving wrestlers still alive. Anyone have any contacts for Bob Ellis?
The last we had talked to him, we were trying to get him in, and he was in the Oklahoma area. And they was telling me that his health was not that well either. He wasn't doing any traveling, and that was about 2 years ago.
Great Luthez.
Man, was he great this day? Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, we can share some stories. And wait till you see the photos I have of him playing chess and cribbage backstage with Ernie Ladd. This was at a Dick the Bruiser show in Indianapolis. And I think Wilbur Snyder is like the referee for this thing. I've got some really funny photos you might enjoy, or heartwarming photos. I'm sorry.
Mike, do you remember the feud between him and Buddy Rogers?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got that on tape when they set up that whole scenario where nobody could break the figure four, and Ellis challenges him, and they do it out in front of the ring announcer's table, and yeah, that was one of my all-time classic storylines.
Yeah, I'm a big Bob Ellis mark. Bob Johnson, before I go, you wanted to ask me something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got two quick ones. I'll ask Herb. I got a question for Herb, but just before you go, Dr. Mike, and I want to appreciate you so much putting the show together. We really appreciate it. But I got a message here from Ross in Calgary. Now I wonder who that guy is. He said he's a big wrestling fan. He's been involved with the wrestling business for many years. And he said Dr. Mike Lano is one of the foremost greatest photographers in wrestling, and he wanted to know where he can get some more really good pictures of Dr. Lano. I'm reading this. Dr. Lano's a collection of Killer Tim or Furpo.
Well, these would be my own shots of them. Plus, I have the great shots that Herb might also want to see. December 1990, no, it was January 4th, 91, of Tim Brooks teaming for Tenryu's promotion in Japan. Again, we all had to take their van. It was the War promotion. So he's teaming with Bob Orton Jr., and they had that food fight. I don't know if you heard me talk about that. They had a bento box food fight backstage before the show. And Jannetty and Michaels were there, the Rockers, who were now working for Vince. And Sean had told me while watching this, he goes, "We love it. We can't get involved because we just got fired again by Vince." That was their quote unquote punishment, was having to travel with Jack Lanza to Japan. But Lanza there, that was the only time he ever, if anybody remembers him backstage, no monkey business. But in Japan, he let his guard down because he had wrestled for the IWE promotion, the third behind Baba's and Inoki's in the mid-'70s. And he just wasn't uptight. Jack Lanza's the road agent, the policeman, was not uptight, and he let Brooke. Well, and Michaels also told me neither guy's working for Vince now. Obviously not Orton Jr. and Brooks never did. So they're just throwing stuff at each other, starting with their bento boxes of food and tempura and the fried zucchini squash and stuff. And it's just the photos, your eyes will pop out. They're just having a good time, just friends, killing time.
Well, Mike, if you got any of those photos with Bob Ward, he runs my Ace Wrestling Academy here for me, and I'd like to be able to show him some of those. That'd really rack his memory.
Well, I posed them at a WrestleMania after party, the 2005 in Los Angeles, and I posed Orton Sr., who was in the wheelchair, Orton Jr., and Randy all together. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody else shoot anything like that, but that was a big deal for me getting that. And then I had photo bombing at Triple H, Iron Sheik, and Sinclair Graham. This was 2005. Actually, it was the post Hall of Fame night party, private party. Lucky enough to be allowed to shoot that thing. My email for anybody that wants photos is WREALANO@AOL.com. Looks like Real Lano with a W in front. And R. Hart, Ross Hart in Calgary. I don't have your current emails. I have the two old ones. So please email me so I have it, because I have a wealth of Stu and Helen shots, from everywhere. And then all the, actually Stu, the very last Cauliflower Alley Stu made was with Diana Ross. Bruce couldn't come because we had heat with Carl Lauer. But it was the beautiful Diana Hart Smith and Stu, of course, beloved legend Stu.
Charlie,
Ross.
not yet.
Anybody, but Ross, definitely email me. Herb, please email me. And everybody, we salute Hana Kimura, Killer Tim Brooks, who we talked about tonight. I wish we talked more about him. And obviously Johnny Rubberman Walker, a.k.a. Mr. Wrestling 2. All great, great legends, young and not so young. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mike.
Good night.
Good night, Mike.
Good night, Mike.
Great.
Herb, while we have
Herb.
you on here, you got a couple more minutes, Herb?
Sure, no problem. I'm a late night guy anyway.
Okay.
Charlie, let's jump in.
Perfect. Go ahead, Bruce, Bob.
Yeah. Okay. I just I had a really good talk a couple of weeks ago to Charlie Thez, and we'd love to have you back for the sequel. Charlie Thez and Herb Simmons back here on the Heartbeat. Please, can we set something up in the next couple of months and have you and possibly, maybe Barbara Goodish and Herb, you're one of our really great guests up here, and the people have asked me, can you have Herb and Charlie Thez back for a sequel?
Yeah, I love Charlie. It's been a few years since I had her in here, and in fact, she came in a few years back for the Bruiser Brody Memorial, and her and Abdullah and Barbara was all three here with us, and then I was looking forward to seeing her up in Waterloo again this year, but we all know what's everything's been canceled. So yeah, anytime you want to do that, just give me the heads up. She's when you get her and Barbara on the phone, I can just sit there and listen to them all night long.
That'd be great. And listen to Herb. Just before I'll let you go, I know Bruce has got a couple of words to say to you, Herb, and all yours, Bruce.
Yeah, just thanks for joining us, Herb. I always appreciate and am delighted with your insightful and intelligent perspectives. And I've said it many times, but I wish there were a few more Herb Simmons around today. The future of the wrestling business would be a lot brighter. So thank you very much, and keep up the great work.
Well, Bruce, I my hat's off to you and the show you guys have done and continue to do. And, the Hart family, you guys, you can't talk wrestling without talking about the Hart family. I don't care what anybody says. And, we're going to continue to do the best we can. I was in the hospital for about a week here a couple of weeks ago, so I'm on the road to recovery. But every day I'm doing something for the wrestling part of it, because that's what I enjoy doing. And it was such a big part of my life with Larry Matusek, and then, like I said, with Sam, the honor of meeting him and learning from him has got to be carried on. Now, what happens when I'm gone, I don't know, but that's why when Harley passed away, I got to thinking. In fact, it was actually Bill Apter that kind of reminded me, Herb, you're probably the last person living there in the area that had any ties to that St. Louis action. And I thought, whoa, yeah, that's kind of scary, you know. But we're gonna do it. That's why I went ahead and got those Bruisers tapes, and I'm in the process of getting those TV tapes transcribed over to DVD. And I've looked at a couple of them I had done, and the quality is good on them. And so the Bruiser's wife, Louise, I'll tell you what, she reminded me. You guys remember the Green Acres program? She reminded me of Mrs. Douglas when she was dickering with Mr. Haney. He'd go one way and she'd go another, you know, on the price.
Yeah.
But I've got them now. They're in the vault, and hopefully we'll get them out there, and we'll have some more historic.
I'd like to get you to maybe get Ace on with you on a show one of these times too.
Yeah, Bob Orton's a good. Would
love to get. I know he's been all over the world, and I could listen to that guy talk stories forever. What a man on the mic. He was one of the greatest heel mic people of my generation growing up.
Yeah, Bob's good, and that's why I said he runs the Ace Wrestling Academy for me, and I was a part of giving his son his first match at South Broadway Athletic Club, Randy. And in fact, I posted a picture on Facebook a couple years ago, but it came up today on your timeline of my wife and Randy Orton sitting on the couch together, and it's got more hits on it than you can count. Everybody texts me saying, "Oh, when was Randy at your house?" Well, you just don't announce that type of stuff, you know. So
right.
Herb, I just got a tweet just came in here just now, and I'll let you go here. But the tweet is from Harold in Mississauga, Ontario, and he said, "Can you ask Herb Simmons if he can book the match himself, Barbara Goodish, Charlie Thez, and Bob Orton? Can you book that
on Heartbeat Radio?"
On Heartbeat Radio.
Yeah, I can. Well, I've Barbara is usually up for it as long as she has notice. And Bob Orton, like I said, I talk to him several times a week. And Bob, the only problem with Bob is he's not too savvy when it comes to computers. But I may be able to arrange it to where he either comes over and we get on my computer or whatever. But yeah, you let me know when you want to do it, and I'll start working on it.
Okay, Harold, Mississauga, Ontario. You heard it first right here on the Heartbeat. Herb Simmons has booked that big event.
Yep,
right here on the Heartbeat.
Yep. You know, like I said, when you get those three people together, Charlie Thez, Barbara Goodish, and Bob Orton, you know, that's a trifecta.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Yes, if you can't work that together sometime late August or early September, maybe.
Yeah, you know, another good one to have, Bruce, would be Bob Orton and Terry Funk.
Yeah.
So make it a 5-way.
Maybe make it a 5-way, possibly.
Well, I don't know if the airways would take all of that. Yeah, because
maybe do a Bob and Terry with you, and then do one with the ladies and you on down the road after that.
Because I can tell you, if we get Bob and Terry on the phone together talking, it'd be like I had Dr. D. David Schultz in a year ago, and I had him and Bob, and went out to lunch one day, and it was the longest lunch I ever had, and I didn't say a word for 2 hours. I just sit there and listened to him talk.
Oh, great!
They went from one story to another. Of course, you know, Dr. D can talk, and when Bob's around somebody he likes, he talks a lot too.
When you're ready.
And Herb, listen, we have a tradition at the end of our show for any of our fallen friends. We're going to do the 10-bell salute, but I've got, if you could stay on for just a few minutes.
Sure.
And I'll do this at the end of the show if that's fine with you. I've got a few other mainly Texan friends of Killer Tim that sent me a brief Facebook messages that they'd like me to read out. If I could wait, and then at the end of this, it'll take me about 5 minutes. And then if we can do the 10 bell salute and close it out. And Sean, is that okay with you?
Perfect for me.
My time's your time.
Okay. The first person here on Facebook Messenger, Mary Nelson, better known as Marie Laverne, the beautiful lady wrestler. Tim Brooks, a good worker and worked hard in the ring. Last time I saw Tim was at the Cauliflower Alley Club. He will be missed by his family and friends. Remember, he's gone, but he will never be forgotten. Rest in peace, my friend, Marie Laverne. Thank you, Marie. Fantastic.
Yes.
And okay, and then we got a few more here. I'm just going to kind of go down. I've got another friend of
Tim.
Uh-oh.
I think we lost Bob.
I think they froze. They hit something because they just totally froze.
Yeah.
He
said, bye, Felicia.
There's been nothing but chaos sometimes with these two trying to figure out, because neither one of them very good with technology. Yeah. I'm not the greatest, but I've come a long ways. Where are they? Yeah, they're frozen.
Yep.
See if that worked. Nope, they're done. Froze. There they go. They'll be back.
Just me and you.
Yeah, I mean, so what's the plans for you guys? Are you guys going to be able to reopen it all anytime soon, or?
I'd be. My day job is I'm the 911 coordinator for our county and the EMA director, and so I've been heavily involved with the COVID, and I really don't see us getting anything going the second half of this year. We're in phase 4 of 5, and our numbers are starting to creep back up, so we're really keeping an eye on that. But boy, I tell you, and this was a big year for us. I mean, we had about 32 events booked for the year, and so they all had to be go by the wayside,
Dang.
Yep. So that's why we're doing a lot of posting a lot of my old videos that I have, and trying to keep the fans. Of course, I got the greatest fans around. They're diehard wrestling fans, and I tell them all the time when I do interviews, it's like, being in the promotional business, it's like baking a cake. You got to have all the right ingredients, and the fans are the number ones, and then a good locker room, and you get that combination going, and that's why for 47 years we've been able to do it.
You still got Stonewall up there helping you?
Who's that?
Mr. Jackson. I believe that was his name. The gentleman that was with you looks like Bubba Ray.
No.
Dudley.
No, I don't remember that guy.
He was with you at CAC. He was like one of your guys that.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, that's not it. I can't think what we used to call him. No, he's not with me anymore.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there's Bob. I see Bob.
Yeah,
there we go.
Guys, very sorry. We're having a tornado watch. They just sent a warning. I hope it doesn't hit. So I don't know if that's interfering in the dam.
Probably is.
You guys get. I don't know if you get tornadoes down there in St. Louis, but
yeah, we get they come this way.
They come through there a lot.
Yes, they do.
Okay, this is from Mark, and he had continue. I met Killer around 89 to 90, could have been 91. We did a few shows together, and I enjoyed talking with him in the dressing rooms. He'd give you advice on your match if you asked him, and it was always to me to tell you like it was, but in a respectful way, not putting you down. I will never have had a bad thing to say about the great Killer Brooks. Again, that's from Mike and in Texas. Appreciate it, Mike. And I've got another old friend of ours here. I've got a friend of the Heartbeat who was on our show a couple of years ago, Eddie Mansfield. And Eddie Mansfield said, this is on Facebook Messenger, Killer was one of the greatest professional wrestlers. When you saw Killer brothers wrestle, you went away saying that guy was tough, a true professional in every way. Eddie Mansfield. Thank you, Eddie. And we have a few more here. We have one here from the Frogman, Kenneth LeBlanc, Froggy, longtime attendee at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame and a great worker in his own right. We had the Frogman was on the show last year. This is from the Froggy. Killer Tim Brooks was one of a kind. He was a true professional inside and out of the ring. Anyone that he would touch truly respected him, and he always had great wrestling skills. Killer Tim Brooks loves his family. I am truly sorry what he had to suffer through the last years of his life. Killer Tim Brooks, rest in peace, my friend. I will miss you. Next time I see you, you will be up there. Love you, my brother. And it was an honor to have crossed paths with the great Killer Brooks. That's from the Frogman himself. Thanks, Froggy. And got just a few more here. We have one from. We have one here. From Andrew Anderson, one of the great indie wrestlers out there. Andrew Anderson. I know Herb's met Andrew many times.
The reinforcer, one of the tough guys.
The reinforcer himself, a long time stable at the Cauliflower Alley Club, and I've seen him at Waterloo, and I've seen him at all the events. I had the opportunity to meet Tim Brooks at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame several times, and the first thing he said to me when we first shook hands was, "You could be a baby face at any given time, but you are a natural heel." I saw him in February for the last time at a SWE Fury TV taping this year. He was frail and gaunt and fighting for his life. James Beard and Tim Storm presented him a Lifetime Achievement Award. It was touching. Killer cried, and I don't believe there was a dry eye in the house. Thank you very much from the great Andrew Anderson, one of the really good guys in our business, and
one of the tough guys.
Tough guys. I tell you, that guy, that guy's still wrestling. One of the real indie, long-time indie guys, you know. And got another Facebook message here from Sam Houston. Sure, Sam, Killer Brooks. I have known a good many years. I have been on international tours with him, as well as here in the States. We have performed together, been in notorious, riotous situations many times, beyond our control. Hell, he was in New Guinea with me when I was almost eaten by cannibals twice. Tim was a professional, and he was my friend. Rest easy with the Lord, Killer, until the bell rings for me. God bless.
Last time I saw Sam, he was getting the figure 4 put on him by Bill Apter in Vegas.
Well, that could.
I want to point out that Sam is the brother of Jake,
and that, of course, he's the brother of Jake.
Jake the Snake.
Eh? And yeah, that was. Thanks very much for that. And I've got another. I got a couple more here. And then we'll do the 10 bell salute. And I appreciate everybody sending in these nice messages. This is from Brett Neighbors from Texas. Happy July. Okay, I remember Tim Brooks always being so nice, even to a fan like me at the time that they had no part in the business. Anytime I asked a question or anything, he was always the first to help out with anything. I also remember him being so funny in the life of the party at the after party of a show in Gainesville, Texas. I wish I could remember specifics, but remember leaving there with my side hurting from laughing so hard. Killer was one of the main ones cracking jokes that night. I just wish I would have known him better. If it were not for Tim, I wouldn't have been in the business today. He trained Kay Downs, and she trained me. That's Johnny Mantel's wife. He was a great, amazing man and a great mentor in the business. Had more from him than he would have. If the business had more like him, we would all be a lot better off. That's again from Brett Neighbors in Texas, and again we have so many people, and we have one more. I want to read this.
One more, Bob. I'm falling asleep.
I'm going to wake you up here because this is one of the really good guys here in the business. Mr. Chaz Taylor from Houston, and Chaz said Tim Brooks was a true hill in the ring, like my father Tugboat. Taylor, when we were in the ring, they were not trying to be crowd favorites. They just did their job. Tim Brooks wrestled all over the world, and people loved to hate him. Tim was not just a wrestler. He was also an educator. He had a wrestling federation, the NAWA, out of Dallas, Texas. I first wrestled with him at the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas. He beat the shit out of me, but I earned his respect because I fight back. After wrestling together, he asked me if I would come and help out with his students at his wrestling federation, so I was honored to do so. Texas is proud to have a man like Tim Brooks from its state. We are very fortunate to have him and his knowledge that passed on to his students at his wrestling school. Like his in-ring work, Tim brought out a sense of no-nonsense wrestling to his training and his wrestling federation. He will be forever missed and always remembered as a great guy and a giver in Texas professional wrestling. That's from Chaz Taylor. Thank you very much, Chaz. And with that, thank you very much, Sean, for hosting the show this evening. And of course, all our guests and Herb. And we're going to end this great tribute to Killer Tim Brooks. And we're going to take Herb up on his offer. That's been booked. Herb Brooks, Barbara Goodish.
Herb Simmons, not Herb Brooks.
Sorry,
Herb Brooks. Herb Brooks was a great hockey coach.
Yeah, Herb Simmons, Barbara Goodish, Charlie Thez,
and Cowboy Bob
Orton Jr. Anyway, that's what happens when there's a tornado near here. Anyway,
and an invite extended to the great Terry Funk as well to maybe join us.
Okay, yeah. So we're gonna end now. Bruce Hart, couple of final questions, words of wisdom to everybody, and then we will end with the 10-bell salute. 10 seconds.
Yeah, thanks to everybody. God bless Tim Brooks. Thanks for the memories.
Okay.
Thanks, Bruce.
Okay. Good.
Nice job, Bruce.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Herb. We'll stay in touch.
Hey, Sean, if you got that email for Mike, Dr. Mike, could you send that to me?
Yeah, I will send that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, you too.
Good night.
Thank you.
Reminding you next week, Sean, we have incredible show next week. It'll be one-on-one with Road Warrior Animal
Joe Laurinaitis.
Well, that could be interesting.
That'll be an interesting show. One-on-one, Bruce Hart and Joe.
Now,
Road Warrior.
Is Joe going to be on a phone or a computer? Do we know?
No, we'll take care of that this week. But he's coming on next Sunday.
Okay. Yeah, again, let's make sure we get him ahead of time and get him all squared away. A lot of these people have been doing, I don't know if Joe was on the COVID con, but a lot of these people were doing the COVID con, which was on StreamYard as well. So if they've done they did the COVID con deals, then they've already done the StreamYard. Like Sonny and a bunch of them already had.
Sean, and make sure it's all set.
So, yeah, we'll have it all set up with you. And just before we end, we got a couple more guests that people have been asking who are some of the guests coming up. In a couple of weeks, we'll be joining us will be Mr. John Cosper, who wrote the book on David Schultz, but he's going to be talking about his book about the life of the Black Panther book. Jim Mitchell. So that'll be a good show. We have also coming up
Black Lives Matter.
And future shows we have legendary photographer and wrestling historian Mr. Bill Apter will be joining us. We have from the California girl herself, the beautiful, vivacious, Sunny, the California girl, Patricia Summerlin
from Glow
Girls, and she's going to be bringing some other Glow Girls on with us on that show. I hear Roxy Astor will be joining us on that show, and then
Marie Laverne and Terry Funk.
Marie Laverne and Terry Funk will be joining us. I also talked to a good friend of mine, Mr. Del Wilkes. He'll be joining us, the Patriot. And we have the beautiful Mike McGurk will be joining us. So we've got
a standing invite to Paul and Stephanie.
Yeah, you heard that. It's Paul and Stephanie.
Have you messaged him yet, Bruce?
What's that?
Have you messaged Paul?
I've actually got a really nice letter from him just a while ago after my wife passed away, and he was extremely supportive and rendering kind of empathy. And he said, if there's anything he or Steph can do, please call. So I'm looking forward to hopefully having him on the show, and getting perspective from him. So
sure. Yeah. If you can get him to come on, that'd be great. Him, and then we're missing your brother still, man. You got to get your brother on. Your brother and Ross on.
Oh, I'm sure we can arrange that.
And the hitman would be nice to bring on. We'll
get him and Ross on.
Sure.
And by the way, Sean, I just got a message here from Johnny Mantell, the president of the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, one of probably the best place in the world the best museum, in my personal opinion, of wrestling is the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Wichita Falls, Texas. And Johnny was going to join us, but they're having severe weather in Bowie, where he lives.
Oh, that's why, yeah.
He wanted to come on, and Kay was going to come on, but they had severe weather problems like they're having up here. And just before we leave, we had a show a couple of weeks ago, and returning the associate producer of The Wrestler and 350 Days, one of the really coolest guys I've ever met in the business, Mr. Evan Ginsberg, will be joining us in a few weeks. So that'll be a great show with Evan Ginsberg.
Yeah, standing invite to Mickey Rourke.
It'd be nice to have Mickey Rourke.
There you go.
And we got a lot of we got so many people on, and we're trying to get a lot of people on. So we're continually working to get them on. And so tell us who you want to get on, and we'll do what we can to get them on the show.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys. Thanks, have a good night. Stay safe up there. I'm going to go dodge fireworks again.
Okay.
Stay healthy.
All right, you guys have a good night. Yeah, trying to.
Okay. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.